Okay, good evening, folks, and welcome to the workshop for April 16th, 2020. Today is a City Council workshop with department budget presentations. I'll turn it over to the city manager first so he can introduce his department heads.
Good evening, Mayor and councilors. How are you? I hope everybody's doing well.
Great.
Nice to hear. So before I do an introduction of what's on the agenda tonight for presentation, I just want to give you a little bit of an overview on where we're at this point. There was an article in the Press Herald regarding what municipal governments have been doing. Phil and I have been talking with you at various times about what we're doing, and you've seen reports by email on the different activities that the city has taken. We have at this point in time furloughed 41 employees as a city government. Those are seasonal, temporary positions. The library has furloughed 16. And I'll send you something that's more detailed than that. We've also, of course, been reviewing the vacancies that we have, and we are only filling essential positions or positions that have no fiscal impact. And in terms of spending, in talking with the department directors, they all understand that we are putting the brakes on the spending and only doing essential spending. So I think we're in good shape. We're monitoring the revenues. Jill has been doing that for several weeks now. And we're in good shape right now. So far, so good. And we will keep monitoring the revenues. And in terms of the estimated revenues for FY21, we've been conservative on the revenues that we have estimated. And we'll talk about that more if you'd like. But I think as much as we can, we've been trying to be careful and thoughtful in terms of what we're doing. On the municipal budget itself, I would like to come back to you with a revised budget for the meeting on April 27th, the next regular meeting. I'm going to call that my final proposed budget. And we will be, at that point in time, talking about having a zero increase on the municipal budget. And once again, I want to thank all of you for your support, and the department directors that I think have done a really good job in terms of trying to put together reasonable budgets. Tonight, you'll have the police department budget, which will be leading off. The library will follow that, then public works, then recreation and sports tourism. Under public works, Dan will talk about solid waste. He also can talk about the water and sewer, not the Auburn Water and Sewer Department, but water and sewer in terms of what we're doing. And then Jill will talk about TIFs and tax sharing agreements. There was a request at the last meeting on tax sharing agreements. And she can also talk about water and sewer as well. And then Chris will be the final speaker, Chris Moma, and she'll be talking about workers' compensation. I would say that in terms of what's happening with day-to-day operations of the city, if you have any questions, feel free to let Phil or me know. We have put up a site for you on questions that have been raised so far, and we are working on getting answers to those questions. One of the things that we're finding in this new norm that we're in right now is that the days are not long enough. So we're working on providing answers for you on those questions, and we'll continue to do that. If you don't have any questions at this point,
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Feel free.
I just want to make sure that we have a little advance notice on the Norway Savings Bank Arena, where we stand, what do you think, how are we going to do something going forward? And then the Ingersoll, I'd like something. I know he's on tonight, but there must be some thinking going into that. Thank you.
Mark is going to be speaking tonight, Mark Goslin, the Director for Rec and Sports Tourism, and I think he'll cover those topics, and if you have a question, please feel free to ask him. Councilor McLeod, I think I saw your hand up as well.
Thank you. I just had a quick question. You said you're going to give us a revised budget. So what the department heads are speaking to tonight, will that be revised or will that match what's in my book?
What they're speaking about tonight will match what's in your book.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you very much. If we're ready, we can start with Chief Moen with the police department budget. Chief, are you on?
I'm getting him. Hold on.
All right.
Best budget of the whole presentation so far. I called that a flat budget.
You're not that lucky, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, hello, Chief.
Okay, I don't know if my video is up and running or not. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
Loud and clear.
Well, good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. Going to start with just an overview of the budget as it's presented. And if you look through this overall summary, we're up about a 3.6% increase over last year. Most of those are built in around salary line items that are contractual that we will cover in a minute. But overall, we're looking at about a 3.6% increase. Looking at revenues, I put in some revenue drivers for us. We have a finite line of revenues with police reports and whatnot, but I wanted to touch on some of the revenue reductions we're going to be seeing in this year. And the first off is the MDA reimbursement. That $20,000 reduction is due because we had a personnel replacement this year. The agent that had been there for 3 years, his rotation was up. He came out, another officer replaced him, and that officer with fewer years on had a lower pay rate going in there. So that $20,000 is a combination of pay and overtime costs because Maine Drug Enforcement Agency reimburses us for the cost of that agent. And that's completely reimbursable, 100%, with a combination of salary and overtime. So that's the reduction that you see in that revenue. That was just a personnel change there. Overall, in court fees, we're seeing about an $8,000 reduction due to fewer required court appearances by our officers. The district attorney's office has done a good job of making the court function more efficient and has led to a reduced number of appearances required by our officers. Now, the thing to remember is you'll see a slight decrease in the court overtime line item as well. And what happens is we aren't completely reimbursed by the court system for a court appearance by an officer. The average court appearance by an officer, it costs about $110 to $120 per appearance due to overtime costs and minimum hours that they're there. However, the court system only reimburses us $50 for that appearance. So we're only at about a 50% reimbursement, a little bit less for that appearance by the officer. And also our false alarms are down as well. Out of the 454 alarms that we had in 2019 that were billable, actually only 55 of those end up being billable because of the way the ordinance is written. Everybody gets 2 grace false alarms per year. So usually after the first one, they're taking steps to make sure that it doesn't happen again. So overall, the billing and the stringent enforcement has led to fewer occurrences of false alarms. So that's the slight reduction in the revenue there. And this is just a snapshot. We talked earlier in the year during your budget department orientation about our grant funding. And this is just an overview of the federal grant funding that we work with on a year-to-year basis. To note, the Homeland Security, the police department serves as the Homeland Security coordinator for the city. And that Homeland Security grant is used for various projects, such as our downtown surveillance cameras, some equipment for fire. We're using $100,000 of grant funding towards the new radio system for LA 911. So that Homeland Security grant money isn't just for the police department, it's for the city as a whole. But it comes through the police department serving as the coordinator for the Homeland Security for the city. Then looking at our next slide, which is our budget drivers. These are the main budget drivers that have driven somewhat of the increase in the budget, or there's been a slight reduction. If you look at the regular salaries, that's the biggest increase that we have. And the reason behind that increase is in this current fiscal year, we had 8 officers that reached either their 5th pay step or their 10th pay step throughout the course of this budget season. The way the contracts are set up, officers get a yearly COLA that's agreed upon in the contracts. However, when they reach their 5th year step or their 10th year step, or they're coming out of probation, there's a significant increase in pay as they hit that benchmark. So we had 8 officers that hit those benchmarks this year. So throughout the course of this year, they're getting those. So starting with FY21, those increases have to be fully funded for the year. Also in the regular salary lines, the parking enforcement officer and the part-time information assistant that handles the monthly billing for parking as well as the permit process, those salary lines were transferred from the parking program into the operational line for the police department. Both employees are housed here, and so their salaries came in under the regular line item this year. So between those step increases and the transfer of those salaries into our line items, accounts for the increase in this line item. Also, we have some MSEA increases that are coming up in the FY21 budget that are also captured in this as well. Both the patrol officer contract and the command officer contract are coming up for negotiations, and those negotiations are postponed right now due to the pandemic. However, they are slated to start back up, and we'll be starting those as soon as the pandemic allows us to. In our holiday pay line item, there's a significant increase there because the officers throughout their contracts are allotted payment for certain holidays, and we are budgeting that so everybody's using that time and receiving that pay. However, some officers will take a day off in lieu of the pay, but right now the increases that we've seen, we've done modeling over the last 3 years, looking at the actuals over the last 3 years, and this increase really reflects what the anticipated cost is going to be for that. There's a slight increase in our educational incentive. That is a contractual item where we help officers attaining their college degrees and provide tuition reimbursement for them. And we currently have 3 officers that are pursuing their degrees, and this is a contractual item that we are required to have. There's a slight decrease in the sick leave incentive. In the contracts, officers, if they go so many days without using a sick day, they receive a sick incentive day, and they can cash up to 2 of those days towards their flex card spending once a year. So we have to associate the cost with that to a line item. So that line item is used to transfer money to use their sick incentive days towards their flex card and flex card spending. The biggest jump that we see throughout these budget drivers is our overtime for regular overtime. Our regular overtime includes if we're an officer short, if officers are being held over, being called in early for emergencies, detectives that are being called in to process scenes or whatnot. And also this line item covers our officers that are active military reserve. We've hired quite a few officers over the last few years that are active military reserve members. So when they go to drill on weekends or their 2 weeks of drill per year, we have to cover those costs to have those officers replaced. So that's one of the biggest drivers in this line item is we're replacing more and more military time as well. Overtime sick replacement, that's another increase. We average, there are 68,255 scheduled patrol hours in a year. Of that, officers use roughly about 4,600 hours worth of sick time, and we're replacing about 600 hours of that through overtime. So we're starting to see a little bit of an increase in the sick usage, and hence the reason that we need to bump up that sick replacement a little bit. Overtime special events. The council has a list of 13 events that they've agreed to provide in-kind services for throughout the course of the year. And that falls on the police department when it comes to traffic control and coordinating those events. This year, the increase represents the increase for New Year's Eve festival. That's been pretty successful the last couple of years, and we've carried that into this budget as well for funding for hiring those officers for that night.
Chief, is it okay if I just interrupt that line item real
Sure.
quickly? And this might be a question for the manager as well. On other budgets, we have line items to cover overtime, police, safety. Do you have a revenue line item that shows a transfer from, let's say, recreation or the city council manager mayor budget into PD to cover that? Or is this an additional line item?
I'll defer to Ms. Eastman on that.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Mr. Manager, if you could just make a note on follow-up.
Yeah, that's fine. Jill can address that when she speaks.
Very
good. Extra pay on call. That is for detectives. It's part of the contractual agreement to be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They rotate through that call, one person per week for emergencies. This year, that is added a little bit because Deputy Chief Kugel has been selected to attend the FBI National Academy this year. And when he's gone, the lieutenants are going to be stepping up to serve that on-call purpose that he does to oversee the operational needs and emergency needs of the department while he's gone. So in talking with the command union, they're interested in being able to do that. It provides them a little bit of career development as well, because as we look towards succession planning in the years to come, it gives them an opportunity to have that on-call status and to be responsible for the operations department 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 weeks while the deputy chief is gone. So that's going to be a tool for us to be able to develop that succession planning with our lieutenants as well. As we talked about earlier with the overtime court, that's gone down slightly as the number of appearances required by our officers has gone down. Also, our testing has gone down as well a little bit. Right now, we have one vacancy. However, we usually budget to hire 2 people throughout a year. We currently have 6 or 7 people that are eligible for retirement in this upcoming year. So we want to make sure if they do decide they'll elect to retire, that we have the funding to be able to test these people and get them hired as soon as possible. Motor vehicles for gas and oil. We average consistently 30,000 gallons a year in gasoline that we use in our fleet. And when we started the budget process, the target number we had was significantly higher than what's now listed. So that's the reason why there was such a reduction from the request to the actual manager proposed, is because the city was able to lock in at a very good rate for gasoline for the upcoming year. So that increase is just representative of what our actual usage is combined with what we're seeing for the bid price. Repairs vehicles is up slightly. We have a vehicle replacement program that we've used over the years. That replacement schedule has been lengthened somewhat. For years, we had a 3-year service life for patrol vehicles. That is sometimes extending into a 4th year or sometimes a 5th year. And what we're finding is the vehicles just aren't holding up like they used to. We're seeing more increased repairs the longer we keep them in service and add miles to them. Over the years, we've done several studies on vehicle maintenance, and the average cost to maintain that vehicle is about a penny a mile until that vehicle reaches about 80,000 miles. And then once that vehicle reaches 80,000 miles, that maintenance cost jumps to about 3 cents per mile to maintain, because we start getting into transmissions, ball joint suspensions, and whatnot, as some of these vehicles are used 24/7. And we'll talk a little bit more about the vehicle expenses in the capital section. Repair maintenance contracts. We have several maintenance contracts that we need to maintain as far as our equipment goes, with our watch guard camera system, with our tasers, with a new radio project coming up. We hadn't funded maintenance for the radios in the past because they were out of warranty and out of service life. And in the upcoming radio project, we'll still be able to service these new radios once again. And training and tuition. Training is our biggest priority within the agency for staff development. Consistently, as we sit down with employees and do annual performance reviews and work with them on their personal development visions, the common thread that we have is we need to send officers to more training. This job has become much more technical in the last 7 to 8 years with all the different elements the officers are facing now, and training remains a top priority for us. Now, in that training, if you look at that number amount, the first thing we have to take out is about $10,000 for training ammunition. We go through $10,000 of training ammunition every year to keep our officer skills proficient. So that remaining money is then meted out for individual officer development and training. We do utilize a couple of online systems to maintain our mandatory training throughout the year, and also some extracurricular training as well. Travel, seminar, and costs are up slightly, $2,000. That represents a CALIA conference. This is our 4th year of our accreditation cycle. We are scheduled our on-site for August, and that will require an appearance at a CALIA conference in the fall to go before the commission in a hearing to review our accreditation status. So overall, those are the major budget drivers that we have for this upcoming budget for a 3.6% increase. And then we look to capital improvements. Like we talked about earlier, we have a fleet replacement schedule that we schedule out the replacements for about 5 to 6 years. And the average vehicle replacement cost is $53,000. We are in the process of transitioning from Ford Explorers to the Chevrolet Tahoes. We've gotten good reviews on the Tahoe that we have in service, and we're hoping that as we get more Tahoes into service, eventually our service costs will start to go down as well. And our cruiser camera replacement system, our cruiser camera system that we currently have is on year 6 of a 5-year service life. It is out of warranty, and we are having more and more issues with that. And that $130,000 is to replace the current system that we have with a base system that will be compatible with body cameras at a future point. And also, police motorcycle purchase. Harley-Davidson Corporation has ended the police lease program for motorcycles. We're no longer going to be allowed to lease them. However, LA Harley is a great partner with us, and they've graciously allowed to extend our lease for 1 year for one of the motorcycles, which will let us be able to split up the purchase and purchase the motorcycle this year and purchase the second motorcycle in next year's budget as well. So LA Harley was very gracious to work with us to make that happen, to spread the cost out over 2 years. So as we said, the 4 vehicles that we're going to be replacing, all 4 vehicles will have over 100,000 miles on them when we do trade them in for the new vehicles. And as we said with the cruiser camera replacement, this camera system will be compatible with body cameras. Body cameras will be coming in the next couple of years. We'll do a slow phase-in for that project as well. However, this base system will serve as the platform for that. And again, our 2014 motorcycle that we'll be purchasing has currently about 9,000 miles on it as it has right now. And each of those motorcycles will be purchased for $18,000. And also in this year's budget, we had a significant amount of money, about $200,000 for locker room improvements to the police station, part of Auburn Hall. And given the bids that came in, that would have represented significant cost overruns. So we'd like to not to pursue that project, and we'd like to be able to take some of that money to put it towards a space needs assessment and study for a new public safety building. As Chief Chase had talked earlier, we are in need for a public safety building. This move that we had from One Minot Avenue to Auburn Hall was a 5-year temporary move that I think we're currently in year 9 of. So as we look to the future, we need to look at a public safety building. Public safety building was identified in the strategic plan as a goal within the strategic plan. So we want to be able to lay that footwork and begin the space needs assessment process for that.
Very good. Chief, good?
Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question if I could, Chief, and then we'll look unless anybody else has their hand up before me. Chief, have you or our city manager have we looked at what the anticipated cost of a public safety building study would be?
We have, but I will say this, that figure that we have in there, the 200,000, as the chief said, and as Chief Chase has said, that it's really a carryover from the money that was there for the renovations. Derek Belanger right now is working to get an updated number, and hopefully we'll be able to give you a better number by the end of this budget process. And we're working on that as quickly as we can.
I think ideally it would be, I know there's a process, of course, but if Derek could get that in time for your revised budget on April 29th, that would obviously be, I think, ideal, because there can be some reappropriations of some of that excess, that delta between the study and what's actually there to alleviate the CIP this year.
Yes, that would be good. That's our target.
Very good. That's my question. Councilor McLeod.
Thank you. All right, I got a couple real quick. Is there any way to bring down our airmo costs in regards to simulation or anything like that we can bring down our training costs?
Actually, no, Counselor. We've tried. We've been at the base for years, and the cost of training is going up slightly with attendance at trainings and whatnot. We do try to host trainings here in the city as much as we can, because when we host a training, we get free slots. So we try to host as much training as possible, especially now that we have the senior center. That's a great venue for training that we want to make sure that we can utilize if possible. So when possible, we will try to host trainings to get those free slots. But right now, we've been at the bare minimum for years, and frankly, at this point, it's not enough training funds to keep the officers properly trained.
Okay, thank you. On the vehicles, is that 53,000 with our trade-in for our old vehicles?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many miles of service life do those motorcycles get, or should they get once purchased?
Once purchased, they average probably 3,000 miles per season on the motorcycles. So it's a long-term investment. We'll have those motorcycles for a lot of years.
Okay. And my last question was about the camera system. Is there a possibility to phase that in as we get the new vehicles? Is it compatible with the old stuff we have now, even though it's out of service?
It's not, Counselor. It has to be completely replaced because all of the current components are outdated and are breaking down on a weekly basis. So that 130,000 gives us a new system that it really can't be pieced in over 2 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. Councilor Lasagna, then Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Chief. I've got 4 questions. One, I noticed in the animal control officer that it's a $37,000 amount, I think, that he is ongoing training. If he's been trained 1 year, does there need to be ongoing training?
Yes, there does. That covers some annual training, because what we're finding is animal abuse investigations can be pretty complex, given the complexity of some of the animal abuse laws that we have. So that allows him to go to some training every year to keep those skills fresh, because it's not an everyday occurrence. And some of the nuances when it comes to those animal abuse investigations can be pretty detailed. And we found that working with the state on developing those administrative search warrants and things like that, it's a little bit more technical than the average officer training that we use.
Do you know about how much it is? Because it was folded into another amount.
I can get that amount for you, Counselor.
Okay, thank you. In terms of travel, I wonder if more of some of these activities and programs will be done by Zoom or some other kind of meeting thing. Have you thought of that, including that or anticipating that in some of the travel?
Most of the travel that we do are for the larger conferences. Kalia will not do a video conference for hearings. That's an in-person appearance for those. So some of those larger conferences, I don't think have the capability to be able to do that. However, some of the smaller trainings that we're doing now, we're doing a lot of training online that the officers are utilizing. So we are doing it currently on some things.
Okay, thank you. And this is my last one. In the overtime for special events, I think that was $19,000. Are these events all free to the public?
Let me look. I don't believe so.
Because I'm just curious, shouldn't the city be reimbursed for some of this?
Well, the city has agreed to provide in-kind services for some of these events. Like if you look at the Dempsey Challenge, the YMCA Fit Fest, Emily's Run, the LA Bridge Run, I believe those all have entry fees involved with them that go towards charity. And the city is contributing to the charity by providing those in-kind services. So those are events that the council has approved in the past to contribute those in-kind services, and all of those are for charity.
Okay, I appreciate that, seeing it as an in-kind service that is a donation, but it still might be worth something looking at, particularly a very large event that pulls in a lot of money like Dempsey. But that's great information. Thank you, Chief.
You're welcome.
Chief, it might be good to provide a list of what those events are, like the New Year's event and so forth. Not now, not tonight, but we can.
I believe it should be listed in their detail sheets on the budget.
I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
No.
We can get that out to you.
Yeah.
That's easy
yeah.
enough.
Yeah, that'd be good.
but I do think it's worth considering, particularly if it's a large income that is made from an event. Perhaps there's a small percentage that could be reimbursed to the city. Thank you.
Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, on the vehicles replacements, how often does, I'll backtrack. Do you get a vehicle, and does the assistant chief, deputy chief, have a vehicle?
Yes, they do. And those vehicles last about 7 to 8 years. My current vehicle is 8 years old with 95,000 miles on it.
Now, do those ever get do you ever rotate them into a line so another officer can get that as you get a new one?
Yes.
And then when you were saying that the price of the vehicle, the new vehicles also include the trade-in value. If they have 100,000 miles to the vehicle, what is the usual trade-in value you get for a vehicle?
Averages anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000. It really depends on the dealer and how aggressive they want to be in trying to land the bid. It varies from year to year. We average 3,000 to 4,000. There are some years I've seen them high as 7. Other years I've seen them as low as 3, just because of the number of miles that are on them. So our average is about 3,000 to 4,000 per vehicle, but it can vary from year to year depending on the aggressiveness of the dealer trying to land the bid.
Do we ever try to put them on an auction list to try to get more money for them?
No, it's easier to be able to deal with the dealerships because they will use that to bring their prices down. My experience with auctions is they're very time consuming on our staff part, and it's much easier and efficient for us to be able to turn those over to dealer and not hold on to them.
Because it seems like such a low price we get. I know there are a lot of wear and tear on them, but it seems such a low price when we pay $50,000 for the car and for all the hardware with it. Then we have to strip the hardware out of it. I mean, the radios and whatnot, and only can get anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000 or so.
Well, but also remember, Counselor, that the service life of these vehicles has been lengthened over the years because there have been years where we have not replaced vehicles as scheduled. So it's kind of our own fault for that, because the longer we keep the vehicle, the more miles we're putting on, the more wear and tear, the less volume, the less retail that's going to have. So by lengthening out our service years, we're seeing a drop in the trade-in value.
Thank you. No more questions at this time. I'll send some more in later.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Con.
And that's a great point too. Just to remind everybody as we're going through this, I know personally, sometimes I think of a question after the presentation's over and we're on to the next. We all have that link online. That is a public facing link as well. I think it's great to involve the public in watching part of the behind the scenes process. So use it, help everything go along quicker. Is there any other questions for Chief? Councilor Walker.
Thank you. The overtime regular, you've gone from 30 to 50. I know you made a comment that it's really needed, but that is one heck of a lot of money to really need. And you have quite a few other special overtimes in here, so I don't know if I can really grasp that and appreciate it. So I probably
Well, what we've done, Counselor, is we looked at the actuals over the last 3 years and what we've spent in that line item. And if you look back to last year's actual, it was $75,000. If you look in the presentation that we showed when I talked about the budget drivers, the actuals right now are 42,000. So that line item is significantly over every year, and by addressing it with that increase, it will help sustain that cost.
Okay, I can agree with you in some of that, but I still think if the pressure is on, that you can find a way of switching that around a little bit so we don't spend that much money in overtime, or we do and then we have to find it in the end. The other thing is, in your narrative, I would like all the departments to go to the narrative and look at the tubes, chains, tires. That probably doesn't really apply to you as much as it does maybe to Public Works, because you people have had four-wheel drives for quite a while now, and I haven't seen anybody put a set of chains on. So I would like the narrative in at least really tell us what it is that you're going to spend $16,500 on without blowing a little smoke around. That's the only thing I'd like to see with that.
That line item, Counselor, is for our tires.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but I just wish they would clean it up, make it, if that's what it is, then make it tires. But most of us know you don't use chains in your business. So I just like to have it cleaned up. The other thing is in the gas. When you said they've done a good job going out to bid and the bid price is less than it was, do you know what the bid price is at this point?
I believe it's $1.75 per gallon. I believe, but Ms. Eastman could verify that.
Okay, no, that's great. I was hoping you would be somewhere close. The other thing, motorcycles. Why do we feel we need motorcycles in the department in Auburn, Maine?
Because honestly, Counselor, it's a great community policing tool for us. It allows the officers to get out and start conversations with people as they're going through. The motor officers that we have found it that when they go through a neighborhood, they have kids running out to them to talk to them all the time versus if they're just going through in a car. So by also having those available to lead in parades and rides and whatnot, it promotes the image of the city and helps with that community policing aspect. So as we look to bring in economic development, we want to maintain a good city image, and those motors are a good reflection of Auburn as people come through the city.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess that sounds pretty good to me. It's the only thing that I know about motorcycles are they're very dangerous on the road because of the other people that are on the road that don't respect motorcycles, and that, in my opinion, puts the risk of police officers at quite a risk being out there riding around on them. So I guess it's a 50-50. It's great for some things, but it's a real dangerous position with many of the people that don't pay attention to motorcycles.
Certainly, Counselor, and what we've done to try to mitigate some of that danger is all of our officers that are assigned to motors go through specialized training to really enhance their operating skills.
Yeah, thank you, Chief.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. I believe it's Councilor Boss. You had a question.
Yes, I see that we have, and thank you for your presentation, Chief. I see that there are 3 school resource officers budgeted in the next year's budget. How many hours per week or per month does that translate into each school building having a school resource officer present during school hours?
Well, we have them assigned full-time to the schools throughout the course of the school year. We have one assigned to Little High School. That high school resource officer also covers Franklin School. We have an officer assigned to Auburn Middle School full time. That officer also covers our RETC and any of the special programs that are out there. And then the third officer is assigned to the elementary schools. And that elementary officer will split up his time through each of the elementary schools throughout the course of the day. And that elementary officer also teaches our PEACE program, which is conflict resolution decision making for third graders and sixth graders as well. So the full-time officers at the middle school and high school, they're there 40 hours a week throughout the course of the school year. That elementary school officer is floating in between the elementary schools on a regular schedule unless one pops up that they need him for something, and then he'll peel off and go to that school. So they are there full time in the school department throughout the course of the school year.
Thank you.
Chief, to follow up with Councilor Boss on that, from a payment concept, refresh us, if you could, on the history on that. This program was started with the SROs. It was first covered by the schools. Am I correct?
No, it's always been covered by the police department. We had a school liaison officer program for close to 40 years now. Okay. And approximately 8 years ago, we entered into an agreement with the school to split some of the cost of that of those positions. And then over the course of those 3 years, the school department elected not to continue with the agreement. So it folded back into our operational budget.
Okay, thank you for that. Councilor McLeod, I believe.
Thank you. Just a quick question about this budget season. Without 3 resource officers currently in the school buildings, are they being reassigned within the city to help alleviate some overtime?
Yes, they are. They've 2 of them have been assigned to patrol, and they've been assigned as extra officers to the day and night shifts, which is help alleviating some of our overtime currently. And the third one is out on extended medical leave due to an injury that he sustained.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Councilor Walker, back to Councilor Walker, the councilor's line.
The officer that always sits at the bottom of Golf Hill and on the middle school, is he one of them 3 officers, or is he a traffic officer?
No, he's a patrol officer.
Just one point. He puts a lot of time into being the traffic officer down there. I would think you would want to put that in here somewhere to show that that goes towards the school, that's for sure, because without him down there, the traffic wouldn't get in and out of there, so he's needed for sure.
What happens, Counselor, is throughout the course for the traffic control for the middle school, that's covered by the patrol division. That's not the school resource officer typically. Typically, the school resource officers are up at the elementary school greeting the kids as they get off the bus. Patrol officers that are working on the patrol shift will cover the traffic control in the mornings, and then our parking enforcement officer will cover the traffic control in the afternoon. So that officer directing traffic is not assigned to the schools. That's a patrol officer assigned to the patrol division.
Yeah, all I'm trying to say is I think we should know the hours that are spent at that one section, and it's only done because the school would not, the buses wouldn't get in or out of there if that wasn't it. So I look at it like you are giving them your officer for whatever time it amounts to in a school season. I think it should be reported that the city of Auburn has given that much time, which is valued in money somewhere along the way.
Well, actually, it's a bigger issue than that, Counselor, because the state refuses to put a traffic light in there. So for safety's sake, I invest putting an officer there for traffic safety. The state DOT will not allow us to put a traffic light at that intersection.
Yeah.
So the state doesn't see a need for it. We've gone round and round with them over the years, and they've refused steadily for a traffic light at that area. So for me, that's a significant traffic hazard in the mornings with our morning commute and our buses trying to get out of there. So it's worth it for me to put an officer there to help maintain the safety of our citizens there.
And I agree with you. All I'm saying is I think the city of Auburn is doing a big favor to that school department and to ourselves. But I would like to know, I guess, the time in the school year that they spend down there so that we really have a picture of what that cost is to you to provide that service?
It's
Yeah.
40 minutes. It's 40 minutes a day, 5 days a week throughout the school year.
For 175 days. It's not a bad idea, though, to look in the general concept of, when you're allocating costs to resources or costs to specific drivers, to have an idea. I'm not saying we should, charge the school department. Absolutely not. But we should probably look at where are we spending our money on directly. Specifically, that lack of traffic light issue at Auburn Middle School. I'm not thinking about this as us subsidizing the school, but that cost, that hard cost, needs to probably go to the state, the DOT yet again, and maybe we apply political leverage at this point too, in order to try to justify this, if in your expert opinion it's needed. And I consider you an expert, Chief. So,
Yeah, I would just say you could find municipalities throughout the state of Maine that are facing the same issue, doing the same thing.
we'll put up our own light. Just won't tell them.
Yeah.
Councilor Lasagna, I think, and then Councilor Gary.
I'm sure this, Chief, I'm sure this is part of your consideration, but I'm just curious because of the lack of sort of social activity out there going on for who knows how long. Are you able to recoup some money in your budget because of that?
Not really, Counselor, because we still have to staff our shifts as we normally would. We don't retract back our staffing or reduce our minimum manning just because we think there's a lull in the calls for service. We have to staff every day the same. We don't have a position to be able to predictively staff for emergencies and whatnot. So really we haven't been able to save any costs because we're still staffing our shifts as we would be. The only cost that we have saved is a little bit of overtime because we've assigned 2 of the school resource officers to supplement those patrol shifts.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to wrap it up with questions if we could, just so we can move on. We've got a really full agenda with some large departments. Is there one final pressing question that needs to be answered? If not, we can obviously do it by email as well. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Chief, you was talking about the state doing it. Is it because for us to do it, we need to get their permission, or for them to pay for it?
We need to have their permission to be able to do it, and they have not given us that permission.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate your time. We appreciate the thought in your budget. And go out there and get bad guys and girls.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, councilors.
Okay.
Thank you, Chief. Next up is Mamie Nay, Library Director.
I don't see Mrs. Nett. Is she on?
Chelsea, I'm sure, is working to get her on. I know she was looking forward to this.
She might be whispering. I've been saving that one for like 3 months.
Just have to give it a second to load.
Okay. It is a new norm, isn't it?
There I am. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. And thanks for the good joke, Mayor. I really appreciate it.
I got one more too. I'll save it.
Saving it for the end. I'm Mamie Anthony. I'm the library director, and I'm here to talk to you about our budget. We really don't have much of a change this year except in administration, and that is due to some personnel changes that we'd like to make. We have had, for the last 4 years, we have had a development coordinator who is not quite the same thing as a development director. The duties are more office-based than going out into the community and raising money. So now with things, with competition heating up within the city, with all the number of projects that are looking for money, we decided that it was time for us to ask for a full-time person, and that full-time person would be called the Director of Engagement So that would involve not only fundraising, but also marketing and social media. That's and education. So that's where that change comes from. And we've had retirements for 2 years in a row that have helped us have allowed us to switch funds from one department into another. So you see lending services has decreased, and we put a good deal of money into the position under administration. So our revenues also are pretty much the same as they have been. This year, donations and gains are up almost $20,000, and that's because we hope that the hiring of a new director of engagement will more than make up for that. So we've tried to take more of a role of the library rather than continuing to just rely on the city. So the first budget driver is that change in personnel. We've reduced professional fees because of reorganization of our endowment files and comprehensive accounting for endowment funds. For the last 4 years, they have been a very expensive part of our operation in terms of using a development coordinator and our bookkeeper. We have now completed a really good review of those files. We have, who's sent in restricted funds, who's sent in non-restricted funds. Before that, or since 2008, there really hadn't been a good coordination of that. So now we know where all the funds are and what we can expect from them. We've also increased the materials budget. That's because we want to be able to provide the current titles that our customers want. We have a problem with audiobooks and ebooks. Their prices continuing to rise and fluctuate. As I've been here for 7 years, and so this probably goes back now to 10 years, where publishers don't have a consistent model for libraries. So we are part of the state consortium for both audio books and ebooks, but we also like to buy some of our own so that we can provide even better titles for our customers, and they are proving very, very, very popular. Automation includes, once again, funding to replace aging public computers. We need to update all of our units to Windows 10. We did about a third of them last year, and part of the real price is the installation of Windows 10. But we now have about 2/3 of our computers are still waiting to be updated and replaced. Those computers were bought 5 or 6 years ago, and they were refurbished computers. They worked wonderfly for us, but they are on their last legs. And my last slide shows that we're very positive about the strategic plan and the role that the library can play in it. We feel that we can be a part of the downtown improvement, part of the education efforts, part of the communication efforts, and definitely our main role is as a cultural institution in the state.
Okay, is that it?
Yes, it is.
First, I'd like to open up to some questions, but in a moment. First, I'd like to ask, how's your staff doing currently? How is the library doing today?
The library is closed. We have furloughed 16 of our 21 employees. The employees that are left are at the management level, and we're responsible for keeping the building going, coming in to check it, keeping our IT, up and running, and then doing a lot of planning and responding now through social media to people. Okay, we initially had a setup where we were lending books, but we had to drop that because of concerns about the not being able to clean the books well enough so that there wouldn't be any chance of infection.
Well, please pass along myself and the councils, on behalf of the councils, our thanks and our best wishes for hopefully soon.
Yeah.
You as a resource back on again.
Yeah. So, I mean, what will probably happen is that when they do let people start to go back out, when they do away with the restrictions, we will come back to work, and we'll probably be closed for maybe 3 to 5 days, a whole week, so that we can get everything back together. Right now, we were taking books back, and we have a lot of bins just full of books that need to be cleaned and reshelved. So it'll take us a while to get those back, get our displays back up and running, make sure all of the IT is working correctly. So it's tough. It really is. It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do.
Of course, I can imagine. With regards to during the furlough time, there's a revenue savings, of course, regardless of what that amount is. Are you looking at how to allocate that into the next fiscal year, put that into your endowment in order to boost up future revenue gain? Is there any plan from a fiscal sense of the library what to do with a current this year fiscal year 20 budget?
Okay, I really couldn't hear the first part of your question.
Oh, you're going to have some sort of with the furlough, with the current situation, obviously your revenues are down, and your expenses are probably down considering the nature of your business.
Yep.
Greater than your revenues.
Right.
Is there a plan right now to carry those revenues over to next fiscal year, invest them in an endowment fund? What is the
the problem is that with this virus, we have had to postpone our major fundraiser for the year until the fall. We usually do a silent auction. We just didn't think that it was time for us to do that. People would have to go out and solicit gifts. The businesses are closed. A lot of businesses are concerned, as we are, about their funding. So I really don't think that we will have a lot of extra funding. And if we did, we would probably probably figure out what to do with it. It would be great to, we try and put as much as we can into endowments, primarily through gifts of our customers. And that's so that, we have the income to have for the future of the library.
Thank you. I'll turn it over to, first of all, to Councilor Boss. She's the council representative to the library.
Right.
Councilor, do you have any comments or thoughts on?
Thank you, Mamie, for your presentation. And I also wanted to say I appreciate the beautiful library of books that you have behind you.
Those are my craft books.
I love it. I just wanted to say that I fully support the decision to include in your budget a development or director of engagement staff person. I think it's so critical. You're absolutely right that the strategic plan and the library have amazing overlap, and the library has so much to offer the community, but also that role will be critical in ensuring that the community participates in all the wonderful offerings that the library has, but also that the community is supporting financially and otherwise the library and learning about ways that they can do that. So I fully support that position, and I'm glad to see it in the budget.
That was beautifully said. Thank you.
Councilor Lasagna?
Thank you, Mamie. I also want to say that I support that position. And I wonder, have you thought about the position certainly as a development position, but also, and I know they're two different skill sets, but as a grant writer, I know that there are, well, actually, I'm sure you're aware of this, the Stephen and Tabitha King Foundation specific grants to libraries, and to have somebody who can help manage the grant writing process for you as well. It seems to me that the return on investment is already, you can see it.
Right. The development that we had previously was Susan Geismar, and she was fabulous in writing grants. She did so much, good work for us in terms of grants that we need to make sure that we can continue with that skill. And actually, the Stephen and Tabitha King grants are probably one of the easiest ones to apply for. Hard to get, but easy to apply for.
Thank you.
Is there any more questions to the library director? Councilor Walker.
Thank you. Mamie, I want to thank you for everything that you do for us in this community, and as well as working with us with the age friendly and everything. And I miss not being able to sit down with you. And one of the big things in the community we hear is when you're closed, their hearts are broken out here. There are many people that I've bumped into that say, isn't there something we can do different? And I know there isn't, for us to all be safe. But I'll be glad when you can reopen, and so can we. And things get back to somewhere near normal. So
Mhm.
good luck with
Thank you,
everything.
Council Walker. Since the library's been closed, I'm not there on a daily basis. So I will happen to pick up a message or two when I do go to the building to check it out. And there is one gentleman who is a big supporter of the library who reads, at least a book a day, and we can't get books to him. And then when I was there on Tuesday, I spoke with a man who is in his mid-90s, and that's what keeps him going too. But it's just not, not advisable for us to do that. We feel that we had a really good plan to work with in terms of how books were handled coming in and going out. But at this point in time, it's just not feasible. And, there's nobody in the building either.
Well, I just want to say thank you, and you got a great budget.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That means a lot. It really does. The age-friendly committee is a good one. I mean, you've done so well with so many things, and I know that there's some things that we had planned to do, but unfortunately, the COVID-19 interrupted.
We'll still do them eventually.
Okay. That
Remember,
sounds good.
I like to recommend to all department heads and speakers never to compliment the counselors. They start getting used to it. They expect it, and it's like feeding the animals in the zoo. Thank you very much, Mamie. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great
I
night.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Mamie. So next we have Public Works. The Public Works Director, Dan Goyette.
Hello.
You're on, Dan.
Okay. I don't hear Peter anymore, so I wasn't sure.
He's sleeping.
I'm here.
Okay.
I'm listening.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. I'm here tonight to present the Public Works budget. As you can see, we are up 5.4%, and the biggest increase of that is with salaries. Those are contractual increases. We have 61 employees, and as you can see, one of our biggest line items is salaries. Purchase services general. I've spoken to you already. You've actually reviewed the lease. This increase of $24,000 was for the pit rental, the space in the pit. Other supplies, premix asphalt is up 23%, $26,000, almost $27,000. That actual number, that total, is what we spend on a yearly basis to fix potholes. That's the cold patching that we do in the winter. Actually, our pothole patching goes year round as well as our cold patching. And that increase actually just covers the actual spend. It's a line item that we overrun every year, and this would just bring us to what we actually spend. We could spend more if it was possible, but we just don't have the manpower to put out that much more patch. Other supplies, motor vehicles is up $26,000. That increase is primarily driven by EGRs, which is exhaust generating recirculation. It's the 7 trucks that we have. They just fell out of warranty, and we tend to replace the EGR systems on these once every 2 years. For some reason, they don't last. I'm not sure if it's because we don't run our trucks on the highway. That's primarily, it has to do with the air emission standards now. They have these EGR coolers that recirculate the exhaust into the engine, so there's less pollution. And I'm not sure if it's because our trucks don't run on the highway, but these tend to go fairly regularly on our trucks, and each one is $4,000 to $5,000 to replace. And we have 7 of these vehicles that they tend to break on. So this is an increase to replace those. And in addition, our fleet, we haven't been adhering to a 12-year replacement schedule, and we're seeing a very significant uptick in our repairs. Motor vehicle supplies, tires, tubes, change is up 15,000. That brings it to 65,000. That is actually still below what this budget line item was 6 years ago. We spend about $15,000 a year in chains and $50,000 a year in tires. We actually have 263 tires that we maintain on our trucks and equipment. For example, our biggest loader needs new tires this year. That's $10,000 just for 4 tires. So tires are expensive for us, and unfortunately, they don't last. Typically, when we get a new vehicle, we'll pick 4. Well, actually, depends on the vehicle. 6 to 8 of our worst tires, put them on that vehicle for the trade-in, and take the good tires off to get as much life as we can. We haven't had that opportunity as we haven't had very many new vehicles lately. So our tires, we spend a lot of money on tires. Repairs vehicles, the 13,000. This is not contracted, but work that we don't do in-house. This is the stuff that we send out to Peterbilt, whoever, to get our work done on the fleet that we can't do. A lot of diagnostic work and systems that we don't have here in-house to be able to maintain these trucks. We can't do it in-house, so we have to send it out. Capital, engineering. These are our construction projects, our major construction projects. Reconstruction is $2.14 million. $840,000 of that is from TIF money. That's the Stetson Road project. It's currently just started. It's ongoing. The other roads are listed down below. This is what we would like to do with that remaining $1.3 million. That'd be Stetson Road, Blake, Parker, Burns, Granite Brook, and part of 3rd Street. Reclamation. That is Blanchard and Merrill Road, major drainage. This $450,000 goes towards our MS4 program, which is our municipal separated storm sewer system. There's a federal mandate, the Clean Water Act, that makes us have a MS4 program. This money funds that. A lot of this work, we contract with a engineering firm to maintain and file our yearly reports. It also pays for our spot drainage repairs. We do camera work every year on our storm drain to identify areas where the existing storm drain is failing, that we can do. Basically, it's they use machines to go inside existing pipe. They line the pipe. They fix spot repairs. It's also money that we use to help pay for our portion of separating stormwater from the sewer system, that the work that the sewer does, so that we do not have combined sewer overflows in the city. MDOT match, the $900,000, that pays for our $500,000 match to the MPI program, or the Municipal Partnership Initiative. That would be for Grace Lawn Road next year. The state has already agreed, or the funding doesn't become available till January 1. But they've accepted our application for Grace Lawn Road for next year. And the rest of the money is used for our STIP program, which is the money that we get from the ATRC, from the federal government. And Maine Mill and Broad is one of the projects that's identified, as well as the intersection project of Maine, Union, Academy, all those small intersection improvements for walkability and safety. And then a resurfacing budget, $1 million. That would cover resurfacing of Danville Corner, Black Cat, Beach Hill, and a portion of Pownell roads. In terms of capital equipment for the Public Works Department, we're looking to replace one 7-yard plow truck. This truck is 18 years old. It has a rusted out frame. It actually did take a sticker this past fall, so we can use it till next fall. We don't think it's going to take a sticker again. So at that point, the truck would be parked if we don't get a replacement vehicle. This would also replace a 12-yard plow truck. That truck is 14 years old. It needs about $50,000 worth of work right now. $31,000 of that is in engine work. 2 one-ton trucks. One would be outfitted with a plow, as you see in that picture, not with a wing, just a plow. And the other is just a frame. It's not a complete truck. It's just a body, and we would actually be mounting the hut box that we were allocated in last year's CIP to the body. So we'd have one unit that is dedicated at all times towards patching. This vehicle would be used year round. It'd have a hot box already mounted on it, so there'd be no trailer. This would eliminate the use of a Class A driver. It would actually allow every Public Works employee the ability to drive this truck, and it would be used for patching year round. The bucket truck, that would replace our existing bucket truck, which is a 1998. It's 22 years old. The existing bucket truck only has a 60-foot boom. The new truck would have a 75-foot boom, which would be very useful in terms of decorations, tree cutting. It would give us much more ability than we currently have. The existing truck is showing significant signs of age, and we're not sure how much longer we can get the boom certified, as it is a 22-year-old vehicle. The sidewalk tractor attachments. The existing sidewalk tractor was purchased 2 years ago with CIP money. We had $150,000 allocated towards the sidewalk tractor. The actual bid price was $156,000. So it was actually over budget at the time of bid, but we had a truck that came in under budget, so we were able to buy the tractor. We did not have any money towards attachments. As you can see, we were already over budget. The pipe camera, currently we contract out with various subs to do a lot of our TV work because we don't have one. Various times we're able to use the the sewer district actually has a pipe camera, exactly the same type that we'd be buying, to camera existing storm drain lines and see what's going on in our system. This would allow us the ability to do it all ourselves without having to contract out or asking the sewer district if they happen to have time to come do our work for us. And the skid steer sweeper is a front-mounted sweeper. It would allow us to do our parking lots and our dead-end roads. Right now, we struggle significantly with the type of equipment we have to be able to do this. This would speed up the process significantly. It would also allow us to do things like Great Fall Festival Plaza and Main Street sidewalks, be able to sweep these with this attachment rather than having to send out hand crews that sweep it into the road and then the big sweepers go by and pick it up. The solid waste budget. Currently, we contract with Pine Tree Waste for our collection. In that contract, there is a 2% increase in the cost of collection. As you can see, the disposal costs are held steady from last year. The recycling disposal is actually a floating number, and I'm expecting that I'm not sure that 75,000 is going to be enough. I'm expecting that number will overrun next year because the recycling market, due to the pandemic, has all but dried up, and significant cost increase have been seen in other parts of the country right now for the cost of disposing of recycling or doing the actual work of recycling. So we're holding it at zero increase this year, but next year there may be an increase in that line item.
Hey, I'm sorry, Mr. Goya.
Yes.
I'm not sure how many more slides you have. Got a lot of information. Oh, that's it? Okay. I thought maybe it would be a good time to pause and go back before you continued, but I'll let you continue then.
That was it. I'm free for questions.
You know what? We think alike then. That's scary.
Yes.
Let me change my view here so I can open this up for the council. While I do that, I do have a couple quick questions if I could. Just some clarifications. ROI analysis. You can't do a return on investment analysis, of course, on everything that you procure or want to procure. Are certain things, though, that would be interesting, even if they were not completely accurate? It might be a good exercise to do. For example, on your the sweeper tool, the attachments. Labor. Is there going to be a savings on labor? Is there a savings on not having a CDL or Class A driver when you're doing patching?
Yes, that would be a savings because a lot of our patching in the winter is done on the weekend. or a significant portion, and we can use a lower class employee to do that patching work, so the overtime cost is less. We're either, if we don't get allocated funding for the truck, we're just going to buy another trailer with the CIP money. We were holding off in the hopes that we could get a truck because it'd just be a lot more efficient for us to have a truck that's dedicated to it. We never have to search for another vehicle to tow the trailer. It's already ready to go, and we can just go out patching every day with it.
And again, I think all those things that you're saying anecdotally absolutely make sense, right? I mean, there is a savings. I couldn't define it. I doubt, except for maybe Councilor Walker could define that cost. But if you could just give us a rough idea in the future, not tonight, on some of the capital improvement CIP purchases you want to make, if they have a quantifiable.
Like the pipe camera, for example, we spend about $6,000 a year in contracted services. So it'll pay for itself in 3 years.
In 3 years, and what's the lifespan on that piece of equipment?
10 to 12 years.
Okay, great. So that's a pretty positive ROI. I mean, it looks like at least a 3 or 4 to 1 return on investment.
Yeah.
Then I want to touch on recycling real quick. I know we have a recycling program and committee that's coming through. I want to make sure they know some of this information about the current situation of the market when they re-meet or meet again. I can see recycling collection. Do we have an option if there is no market for recycling, instead of paying the $75,000 to truck everything up to Old Town, which I believe is what happens? Do we have the option to collect, maintain a collection contract, and then dispose at MWAC?
Yes, we wrote our contract with Pine Tree that we can discontinue any portion of the service anytime we want.
So in theory, we can keep the front-facing recycling continuing with that cost, which is more than what we currently pay, but that cost. But instead of that $75,000 going to third-party disposal, we can then truck over to MWAC and dispose there for our normal tipping fees.
It would be some manipulation because they would probably prefer that we only do it with one vehicle versus sending out 2 trucks. They would just put it all intermingle with our existing trash.
Mm-hmm. Got it. Okay. And if we could just have that option written up, and Councilor Lasagna, if you can make sure we get that and you get that out to the recycling committee too. You know, I'm not saying dispose of or get rid of recycling, but I mean, the market is the market right now. And I think everybody needs to be aware of that, especially during this fiscal crisis that we're in.
This information is all really helpful. And when we get it written up, I'm happy to present it to the committee. I can even send it out before we meet again because they're very engaged and they'd be interested. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. I'll open this up to the council. Are there any other questions now that I got a big screen? Councilor Lasagna?
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Goyette. A couple things. So in the 7-yard plow trucks in your budget, you asked for 430,000, but you're asking for 2, correct?
We were asking for 2. The manager had reduced that to 1.
Okay. Thank you. The last one I have is you have $8,400 in there for educational incentives. What is that?
That is the same idea as the police department. We reimburse employees if they want to take college classes that pertain towards public works. For example, we had a supervisor who was taking a lot of, he was very computer illiterate, basic Excel, Word, email, that sort of thing over at the community college. And this reimburses him based on his grade. It's contractual in the union contracts as well. If they want to take educational classes that pertain towards public works, that will reimburse them if they get if they pass the class, essentially.
Okay, so can they use that money to take classes that don't specifically support their work at Public Works, or is it?
No.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. That's it.
Very good. Next, Councilor McLeod.
Thank you for your presentation. I just had a couple of questions about some of the CIP items.
Yeah.
For example, our boom truck and some of the other items that you were mentioning might not be stickerable or serviceable anymore. Hypothetically, if those don't get funded, what happens next year when we don't have a boom truck or that plow truck?
The plow truck, we would have to look at either combining routes so that some of our roads that are plowed every 4 hours become roads that are plowed every 6 to 8 hours. In terms of the boom truck, we would have to either rent a truck or spend significant money to get that truck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Goyette, thank you for your presentation and stuff. In your solid waste budget, is there anything that pertains to our spring cleanup? Or where does that fall in your budget?
That would be paid for out of the solid waste and my budget. Jill and I always work out how we can fund it that particular year. It costs around $70,000 to fund it. In July, well, following this budget season, Assistant City Manager Kroll and myself will be presenting to the council a number of various options for spring cleanup moving forward. Right now, it is funded for next year. It has been every other year for 6 to 8 years now.
I know a lot of people are upset with the fact that we don't have spring cleanup this year.
It's been every other year now for 6 to 8 years.
I thought which we had money in the budget. I thought we threw in an extra mini version one year.
I'm not sure I don't remember any extra money. No.
So there's no way we could open up Amway or someplace to let people take stuff on their own?
That's already there.
Well, I mean, something with no charge.
Currently, there's no money available for that. No.
Thank you.
Councilor Walker.
Yeah, you said the money's in there for next year's cleanup. Where is it?
I'd have to confer with Jill exactly where it's being held.
Well, that's not much of an answer to us telling us it's in there and then telling us you don't know because Jill don't know or Jill hasn't told you yet. You're the director. I would think you would know.
Well, I manage the contracts. I don't necessarily manage the funding.
Well, maybe, just between you and I, maybe you should know the answer before you give some answer that makes it sound like you do know what's going on, and yet you don't know. So
hold on. Well,
the recycling. If we was going out to the area that we own here in Auburn, or 60% of it, what is the savings that we would be right now instead of 75,000? What would the savings be if we were hauling directly to our place?
That whole recycling collection amount would be gone.
120 plus 70, was it?
Was it 105,000, 104,000 for next year?
That's for collection, yes.
Yes, that number would disappear.
What's the 75 cover?
That pays for the actual cost of disposing of the recycling.
And that is approximately how much per ton?
It varies because it's a floating number that's based on the commodity rate at the time. It can be anywhere from $75 to $115 a ton.
And just so everyone knows, it's $41 a ton at our facility.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Mayor, I've got a comment.
Please.
I just want to say we're very fortunate to have Dan Goyette as the Public Works Director. The comment that was made regarding the spring cleanup, that's not something that I think we should be commenting on. Dan does a very good job. Jill does not have a specific line item for paying for the spring cleanup, but what she does is and she'll talk about it herself. She will fund that spring cleanup. And I look forward to, even though I won't be with the city at that point, seeing the workshop that you have regarding the future of how you want to handle that issue. And I know that Dan and Phil Kroll will present a good workshop for you and give you something to think about for the future. Thank you very much.
Very good. Is there any more comments for Dan or Scott with regards to Public Works equipment?
Yeah, would you clear the $70,000 cost up for me when you have a chance? I'd like to know where you come up with that number.
For disposal of spring cleanup?
I don't know what the 70,000 means, but whatever it means, I'd like to know.
That's the disposal cost.
Disposal where? Do we dispose everything in one place, or do we go all over?
No, it's all over the place. We shop around for the best prices. Last year, we actually did very well compared to the spring cleanup we did 2 years ago. Our prices were much better last year.
Can I guess it was somewhere between 35 and 40,000 last year?
That was for one particular portion of it, yes.
Thank you.
So Dan, yeah, if we could, just as a follow-up, some ROI analysis too on certain applicable capital improvement projects or purchases, I should say. That way kind of help us at least visualize the savings and then communicate that out well. Okay. Great. Thank you very much, folks. Looking forward to it. And one of the recycling information to Councilor Lasagna as well, and the comparative cost too. And I think that's going to be very helpful. Okay. Mr. Manager.
Thank you very much, Dan. Next up, we have Recreation and Sports Tourism, and the Director, Mark Goslin, will be joining us soon. Mark, are you on?
Mark needs a haircut, it looks like. Oh, that's Sabrina.
Oh, that's not nice. I used to have hair at one point, you guys. You know that, right?
You should see my new man bun, my quarantine man bun.
I know. I did used to have a nice set of black hair, but that has long gone.
Did you blow out your light bulb or something?
Yeah, hold on. Let me try to get another light on in here. Thank you, Councilor Walker. That better?
Beautiful.
I didn't think you guys wanted to see my face all that much.
That's your shiny head we wanted to look at.
Oh, boy. Nice to see everybody. Everyone safe? Everyone well?
Perfect.
Good. It's good to see everyone. Appreciate the time this evening. I also with me, of course, is our great team with Sabrina Bass, Rory Mushler, and Jeremy Gackham, who run the divisions for us as part of our recreation and sports tourism. So we'll get into it. We don't want to waste any time, and we'll get into this if that's okay, Mayor. You good to go, and councilors?
We're ready.
Excellent. Thank you. First slide that we wanted to bring up was to talk about our budget drivers. This is where we came through with our budget and working with the city manager. I'm going to let each of our department heads talk about these. The rec department budget is going to be seeing a 10.5% increase. Some of that, or a good portion of that, is we did add another facility to our repertoire here at the city, which has been great with the Auburn Senior Community Center, which has been fantastic. It's actually been kind of a key point in the COVID crisis right now, and the leadership of Sabrina and our staff down there with our grab and go program. Ingersoll Turf Facility seen an 11% increase. And then Jeremy will talk about that. And then Rory will talk about the Norway Savings Bank Arena budget, which has seen a 22% decrease in the budget. So Sabrina, I'll leave it up to you to do a quick synopsis of what's going on with the rec division side.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. So we'll get right into it. One of the biggest increases in the rec budget for this year is regular salaries. This is due to taking a part-time senior programmer and moving it into a permanent full-time position, which is 30 hours a week. On top of that,
we removed one of the recreation specialist positions because the general fund or this portion of the budget only covered 25% of that position, which included the fringe. And it felt best to place that with the turf facility because of the duties that that programmer was, recreation specialist was providing. There was also just some basic with your typical annual increases, the cost of living, and some adjustments from the comp plan. So as a result of these moves, the biggest increase, I would say, across the board with our funding was due to the regular salaries. The part-time salary account also increased with adding the Auburn Senior Community Center. We kind of found that there was a need for increased building supervising, specifically past that 4:30 mark when most of the staff is gone. There's also a lot of weekend activities that go on, not just in that center over the last few months, but also within the Hasty Community Center and offsite as well. By being able to fund those hours for the part-timers that cover the actual building, we then are able to provide the programming at a free or reduced cost. Otherwise, if we have a staff member in a building or covering a program, then that funding needs to come somewhere. And if it's not charged directly to those that are using the space or the program, then we find ourselves in a tough situation, which is really what we experienced this past year. So we also wanted to make sure that there was some funding provided. We've seen an increase in the demand of our senior bus trips, with the new minivan that we have been able to purchase this year. Everyone's loving it. It's a little more easier to get in and out and instead of the van. So we are seeing an increase in the amount of trips that we're needing to provide, and being able to offset that extra programmers or part-time bus driver's salary will help keep those prices for the trips down to either no or low cost. A lot of times we add a second vehicle because right now we have a wait list of 8 to 10 to 12 people. And that will just help make sure that those programs are not having to increase their prices. We did also need to make sure that we added a little bit of funding to go towards our big city events, which are the New Year's Auburn, the Bicentennial Parade that's coming up, and the holiday parade. So you'll see an increase in that line item as well. We do not have an employee that's going to get the longevity bonus this year, so there's a decrease there. Our overtime account went up slightly. Some of this is due to the call-ins of our facility manager for any snow or weather related items, because he did handle the plowing and taking care of the doors and items down in Pettingill, outside of what Public Works supplies. The PS General, there was a decrease. A good portion of that was due to last year, the removal of the rebranding funding that was put in for fiscal year 20. That was removed, but there was also an increase with the new registration system, which we are just about to go out to RFP. We've talked a lot about how our current registration systems across all of our departments, we really needed to get into one that, communicated across the board. It was a little more efficient and easier and user-friendly from the customer standpoint on the websites as well when they register. Some of these other line items are just small increases. They're really due to reflect what we're currently using. Again, we've tried to keep track of all of the expenses that were due to increase in demand with adding a facility and more programming. So a few of these line items are just reflection of those things. Some of it's little, Some of it is more than what we anticipated and had projected for in last year's budget. The operating supplies went up. This was due to wanting to get big, large tents. Every big event that we've been doing in the city, we've been needing some large tents. And instead of going out and renting those, city can purchase those, have them, we can use them over and over again for all the different things that we do with New Year's, Auburn, Art in the Park, Summer Camp Carnival, Employee Picnic, etc. There is an increase with our maintenance supplies. This was due to the tiles in Casey and Auburn series and are both needing to be done. Some of the other big increases, obviously with the water and sewer, there is a reflection of what those increases are forced with us, and some of these line items are adjusted again to reflect what we have been able to collect as data for what we're currently using in these facilities due to the increase in demand and space. One of the big items again is the building repairs. The pond building needs a new water heater. That's just over $3,000. So there is an increase in that line item. Dues and subscriptions that increased. We moved with a new motion picture licensing so that way we can show movies in all 3 facilities that are located in Pettingill. With then the community programs is kind of the last one that I'll touch upon real quick. There's a decrease of $5,000 with this. We moved the art and culture line item from this portion in the budget. That was increased in the request from LA Arts from 5,000 to 10,000, and I can provide that a breakdown, but I can tell you 8,000 of that request is going toward materials for programs. So Art in the Park, there's been an increase in demand for materials for that, as well as the story walk that has gone along the river walk. We have 8 posts that we put in. We want to put in another 8 posts, and then we need to have a little more for expenses for the materials that would go inside of those. So that would be 16 posts that we would have to provide materials with, and we change those monthly. So that's where you would see a good increase in that line item.
Thank you, Sabrina. That covers our rec division. Rory Mushlin's going to talk to the Norway Savings Bank Arena and the positions, the new position. Go ahead, Mayor.
I'm sorry. Before we go into Norway Savings Bank, this is a decent, at least psychological divide, I believe, for the council, especially for me. Can we ask some questions and get some detail with Sabrina while she's still on before we segue out to ICE?
I like it.
Okay, thank you. Couple, I've got a couple questions here. Let me just change my screen so I can see. There we go. Thank you. I'm looking through this, and I've got some overlapping questions, i.e., where some of our money goes for events, for overtime, for police. I'm going to ask that to Jill when she gets in, but I want to look at some of these costs and and really have that conversation on whether or not they're needed. And I'm looking for it now, but your winter festival, Sabrina, I believe that's a net cost to the city post contributions of $10,000. Am I correct on that?
In past years, I would say it would be close to that. Staff has adjusted and changed because Winterfest is not funded through this budget. It relied solely on sponsorships. Those sponsorships went down over the years. And so therefore this year we cut almost all of the expenses because we were not seeing that offset. And this budget did not have any of the offsetting for a Winterfest, a Summerfest, holiday celebration, those types of events.
I don't want to get involved and too granular on what a good event is versus a not a good event. But I do believe that at a certain point in time, we do need to have that hard look at what is really worth it. Is it a good event, or is that money better appropriated someplace else for more impact to a greater audience or marketplace? I see this in a lot of organizations. We do things just because we've always done them. And I know firsthand working with you all that you're constantly reviewing and doing that after action review. And I say that too, not just because of Winterfest, I'm not picking on that, but it segues into an indoor farmers market for a cost of manager proposed $5,000. So this is the increases with the addition of the indoor market, correct?
So in past budgets, $5,000 has been allocated for an outdoor farmers market. This past year, we were able to transition the market into an indoor one using barely any funds that were left from the outdoor market. We also made a change in that we no longer have a market coordinator. We were able to put that program onto one of our rec specialists. So therefore that freed up some funds, which allowed for, we could try and get through, a full fiscal year of an indoor and outdoor market with vendor fees still needing to be in place and potentially a few additional sponsors if we could get here and there, or in-kind services with like printing and marketing. So that way we can get the coupons and any other new programs or incentives that want to be put in place.
So $5,000 is all in all year, indoor and outdoor.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for that. I will say in a general comment on this budget, it's hard to see revenues, especially in your budget, because chances are, you are the most revenue-driven department out there in general. Recreation, Norway, Ingersoll, all together. Looking at things, the layout, I would, if I could make a recommendation, that we probably look at different layout in the future. Projected actuals for this fiscal year would be important. Revenue offsets would be really critical in order to gauge some of this, even participation numbers and reach. And if that's a separate supportive document to the budget, so be it. I've got 1,000 questions here, and a lot of them are nitty gritty, but I think they can be encapsulated with my previous comment. I'd like to see what the impact is on recreational programs, where our strengths are, our weaknesses, what opportunities do we have with summer camp, for example, and what are our threats through outside competition, lack of funding, potential threats with regards to lack of, let's be honest, sponsorship during this downturn in the economy, which we all know the first thing they do, or companies do, is they cut charitable giving and sponsorships. So, and maybe this already exists, but again, I think that's going to be important. And maybe if we can get this prior to the end of the budget season, Mr. Manager, Mark, or at least something to that effect. Does that make sense? Am I overanalyzing this on?
No, I understand your point. The revenue section does have a line item on recreation special revenue, but I understand what you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. Questions, Councilor Lasagna, please.
I want to piggyback on what Mayor Levesque said, that this is really an opportunity to be able to look across the board, since we are trying to transition to sports tourism way of looking at what we do in this community, and to really think critically about what the mayor said in terms of what are we doing things just to do them? Do they really support and feed into this idea of sports tourism? And I think this is the chance to be able to do that. I have a number of questions too, and maybe I'll get too nitty gritty. I don't want to, but things, for example, like the tot lot, that's something that we've got money in there for. What do we get back from that? And I know that it's, again, in some people's hearts, it's a really wonderful thing. They love it. But if you've gone out there, and I went out there in the fall, it just doesn't seem like something that is very actively used that benefits the city. I also think of something like requesting $100,000 for baseball fields right now. And I do see that they do generate some income and they're very popular. And I know that, but is now the time to try and do this? And I don't know how much they'll be able to be used specifically this summer, but I think it's worth thinking about that. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about is, and I guess I should wait until we do the Ingersoll because it has to do with the mezzanine and feeling that maybe it's not the time for that. Thank you.
And before I take another question, I just need to apologize, Mark, Sabrina. I knew I saw it a month ago when we first got these books. I totally forgot it's there, and now I just found it again. You do have revenues broken down along with expenses per program, youth and child. It's in our books. I apologize for that. Again,
and those are actual numbers. So that way it shows it's a reflection of what calendar year. It is not go on a fiscal year because a lot of our programs are broken into two different fiscal years. So that is like a calendar year, a January to December, the full program cost, participants, breakdown.
Got it.
And with that information, I think this is again a really opportune time to really look and critically about what is there, as the mayor has said. It for me. Thank you.
Can I make just a quick comment, if I could? On the tot lot, we actually have had conversations at staff level about there are certain things that maybe we need to invest in, and maybe there are other things that maybe we don't invest in as much. And those are policy decisions that the council will need to make at some point with workshops leading up to a decision. The baseball field, I would just ask you to think long term. This virus that we have, this will go away at some point, and we need to be best positioned to be able to recover. And I think sports tourism is an integral part of the future of the city of Auburn. And I do appreciate your comment, Councilor Lasagna, but from our perspective, we see that as an integral part of what we're trying to do. It will be a policy decision the council will make, but from our perspective, we think it's important. Thanks.
Mayor, can I just say something also to your comments? I mean, I think you, I think you brought up a good point about the SWOT analysis. I mean, we're constantly thinking about those types of things. Our new business action plan that we put together is very detailed, and in that is an evaluation tool and a measurement tool of, trying to figure out what are the things that are working and what are the things that we need to take a closer look at. So, I mean, that is top of mind for us as well.
Okay. No, very good. Thank you. Councilor McLeod?
Thank you. In going with those SWOT analysis, are we also taking in the factor outside of money that some of these programs might be a net loss to the city by some, but it's the only Halloween thing that's going to happen for some of the kids in our neighborhoods, or the only event that's going to be there? I just want to make sure we're not turning this into an entirely revenue generating machine that, all of the taxpayers are funding this. So we want to make sure that we're not losing any of the stuff that might be slightly subsidized.
Yep.
I'll give you a financial or business term to illustrate that, and it makes it sound perfectly acceptable all the time. It's called the loss leader.
Perfect.
Just say Halloween's a loss leader. We lose money in order to make it up somewhere else. And usually most people will be like, okay, that makes sense. Very good. Okay. Is there any other questions? Councilor Walker.
Yeah. I want to piggyback on what McLeod, anyways, what was just said. We have to be very careful that we don't forget we've got a lot of poor people that use the recreation department, and without the recreation department, and I know this personally, I was there for 40 years. If they didn't have the recreation department to look up to and to come to, that had very little money and still feel like they were rich when they were done, we didn't do them a service, because I know many kids couldn't rub 2 pennies together, but we made it so they had a place to come. We looked up to them, we respected them, and they respected us. Probably as much as they respected their own parents when they got home. But it's the recreation department has made this possible in the city of Auburn, because we've been good to the kids that don't have a whole lot to look up to. And we have changed the lives of many kids over the past 50 years that I know for sure. So Sabrina, we definitely are not looking at how rich you have to be to use your programs. We just want to make sure that everybody knows exactly what your programs are costing. But I will always be there to cheer you on for the youth and the families that don't have a whole lot of money, but look at you and your department for a place that they're welcome. So we'll be there with you when it comes to the end. Trust me.
Thank
I have
you.
a couple questions though.
Yeah.
Festival Plaza. We're talking about possibly taking that fountain out of there, but I see no comments in any of your narratives saying that there could be a savings. Now I know you know how much it costs for the water that we waste down there. So I think there's a chance to reduce that budget by some amount. I don't know how much, but I'm sure you can figure that out.
Yeah, I have
Electricity.
that.
Electricity. If somehow you can do a little in-house study, I'm sure you can reduce that with the Festival Plaza as well and keep it safe for people to come and go. The very last thing I want to comment on is I know times are going to be tough in the very next year, but the Liberty Fest, the Balloon Festival, we need to be able to become more partners with the people that want to run these things. And sponsorships need to be part of us as well as part of them, meaning like the Balloon Festival. They go out and get all kinds of sponsors, but we still put up $10,000 to be a sponsor. I think there are ways that give us a whole year, but I think there's ways that we can partner with these people and not have to give $10,000 out of the city budget, but find sponsors that will support us. And I believe that is a job for Mark to probably figure that out, because I think that's the position he sits in. But the New Year's has been something that I know our mayor really wanted to have and did a heck of a job with whoever he partnered with to get the money to put this on, and us within the city helping him. But Liberty Fest and Balloon Fest needs to be looked at, and is it really something that's serious enough that we need to give that kind of money to support it without having supporters supporting us? Other than that, I think you've got a great budget, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Walker.
Any other counselors? Counselor Gary? Okay,
I want to sort of piggyback a little bit on Councilor Walker. It's not just the kids and the families, it's also the seniors. If it wasn't for our senior center in the rec department, a lot of seniors wouldn't be able to experience as much stuff as they do today, as well as, you never know, some of them, when they were younger, they weren't able to experience the things that they are today. So kudos to the rec department for thinking out of the box and trying to reach out to various different programs that these seniors can participate in. Anything from something as simple as a lunch and learn where they make a craft project, or something like similar to the diabetes clinics that they've had.
Yep.
We're doing so much. We are doing more than even some municipalities. So, like I said, I want to thank the staff and the people that help make Auburn the way it should be, where we all care about each other and we want to do things.
Let's not forget those middle class, middle age, upper middle class people that make up a component of our city too. I'll be honest with you, I hear a lot from those folks, and they're wondering if there's any programs for them.
They do.
So when I say that half to jest, but not really, because when we're doing a citywide recreation program, we got to make sure that we're actually hitting every slice of our demographics, and our offerings are actually there for all, and not targeting just to one demographic over another.
Well, they do have various programs. You just have to go online and get their schedule of different things, and you can
Belinda, Councilor Gary. Well, so it's not an argument. This is just a statement that there's a lot of folks that we have to think about in the city, and I'm glad our rec department is. So the addition of some new events, they most certainly are increasing that catchment base. So
I've got one more question.
Go ahead, Councilor Gary.
Okay. Since the senior center came online a little bit over a year ago now, Have you found out the cost projections of what it takes to run the senior center? And
We
what money?
we have not collected a
Yeah.
full. Sorry, go. You can
Okay.
finish.
No, it's also, I mean, I know you've rented it out for various groups to come in, anything from like the police department to a birthday party.
So we have not collected a full year's worth as we opened up in November. It's sad to say in that when this epidemic, hit, we were hitting our prime. The senior center was being booked. It was actually hard to get in and make sure that we had access to everyone that was looking into there, on top of the programming. So from a revenue standpoint, I think we have maybe a month or two of smaller programs that we're initially trying to, kickstart things. It would be very hard for us to project an accurate amount for a full year's worth. I think we have a better understanding as far as expenses, as opposed to revenue at this point in the game. Hopefully, again, I will say near and dear in that center was critical in how we've been able to respond to the current situation. And it's been great for staff to go through that process to see what are the things we need, because there's still some items that we're not there yet in that place to be able to serve, not only during a crisis situation, but programming, day to day and in general. So, but we are keeping track as much as we can. We do have, some numbers for, January and February that we can base it off of, but it'd be hard to put a full year's worth together at this point, but it's being demanded, which is a really good sign.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Gary, just to piggyback on that, if you can just give us some time to go through one full year of allowing us to track some of that information. You also got to remember too, this year is going to be hard for us to benchmark too, just because of the pandemic. What's nice though is from a standpoint of utilities, some of the harder things for us to project this past year with Sabrina and I sitting down was kind of like the utility side of it, and not understanding what we had for a full year with running the building. What's nice is we'll have those numbers kind of set in place, and then we'll be able to hopefully benchmark some of the rentals, some of those other things, in the years to come.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
I'm sorry, Councilor Walker, didn't see that.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on what you had just said, and you're absolutely right. But for Belinda and myself, we already knew that there are many programs for the middle age and up to 50, 55 years of age. So we weren't leaving them out. We were just saying it took us years to get to the point where the seniors finally had something that they can call home. And the youth are many of these young men and women that do the soccer, softball, baseball, lacrosse. Them are your young people, anywhere from 20 to 45 years old. My son was still pitching at the age of 44 years old, softball. And he grew up using the recreation department when he was younger, and then said, "Hey, Dad, I want to be a softball player." I brought him on at the age of 16 and played from the age of 16 to 44 with many teams. And that's a young man that really loved the recreation department and everything they did to make it possible. So I didn't personally leave them out, but
it's just,
I know that
we always have to make sure we're talking about everyone. And we do have a lot of programs.
That's
and
right.
we need to keep, increasing in all sectors. It's a critical job. It's delicate, and frankly, it's not easy. I used to work in recreation years ago, and it's just finding that balance is difficult. I was that kid, that couldn't afford to do anything else but recreation. And Councilor Walker, you struck the nerve. I felt like a superstar when I had my Little League uniform on. That was awesome. That gives someone with very little to no means something to be proud of. So all these things fit into that recreation component, that's self of community pride. We're talking about that more later too. So no offense, but it's just something that I always want to remind everybody, because I do hear from folks that thank you for having something for us in that category. So
and remember all of the different groups that that do sponsor all the young kids like you talked about yourself in the hockey and the baseball and every other, cheerleading. I've never been a cheerleader, probably thankfully, but I watched my daughter and them as they grew up cheerleading and going out to win competition and everything. It's just from the little tiny year, 5 years old and up to where you are today. It's just great to see that.
Is there any other questions about the budget?
One other.
Councilor Carrier, I believe.
Yeah, and it can be just a general question across the board, and I guess it has to do more with utilities than anything else. I mean, with everything closed, I know we're using the senior center and stuff, and I know that we're keeping the other facilities maintained. But are we going to see anything in the way of utility savings? I mean, if maybe more so for the ice arena, are we keeping the ice on it? Have we shut it down? I'm just trying to see if there's any kind of a savings at all out of this that we may be able to, because we're going to lose a lot of revenue during this time span. I'm just looking for any kind of savings we might make up.
I think for Norway specifically, what we've done is we have very limited staff, working. All the lights, utility-wise, lights are staying off in the arenas for the most part. Rink 1 was removed immediately once we shut down, so one sheet is completely out, which is our concrete base. Rink 2 is our sand base sheet. We have operating at a much higher set point, so normally we maintain that sheet at 18 degrees. It's sitting at 24 and a half. So we're immediately going to see savings in that regard. The ice is, I don't want to say it's melting, but it's softer. We're not maintaining it as a playable surface. We're maintaining it to hold the sheet so we don't lose it. So I think in a lot of those ways, we're going to see savings. We're also not using water as much because we're not flooding either side. So right there, we're projecting a 15% increase in water and sewer. That right now, we're not using any water and very little sewer for the arena, at least. I can't speak for the other buildings, but for here, that's what we've done to try to really save as much as we possibly can.
Okay. Very good. Councilor McLeod.
Real quick, Mr. Goslin, you said it's about a 10.5% increase. What was are the raises contractual? Any of the increases?
Sabrina, do you want to talk about the increase? It was some shifting of some positions and another position, but Sabrina covered it first, but I'll let Sabrina talk about that.
So there was minimal increase was due to annual performances and cost of livings, and then the comp study. That did not equate to what the big number is. That is a reflection of taking a 15-hour part-time senior programmer and then knowing the demand was going to be increased once that facility was opened, and we shifted that to a permanent part-time. It's now a 30-hour and an actual recreation programmer position.
Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we move on to Norway? Savings Bank? No? Mr. Goslin? Rory?
Rory, do you want to jump right into Norway?
Sure. I think, we just talked about a little bit of the savings and what has been going on here. Budget-wise, for next year, we did our regular salaries did go up 14%, not 15 as reflected in the slide. That was the result of adding a full-time ice technician position. Essentially, we operate right now with 2 full-time staff members on that side of the building, on the operations side. We've pieced together some part-time employees to make up the difference there. However, realistically, the 1 full-time position will allow us to save on 2 part-time positions that we're using at a large scale. So that'll be honestly, I think we'll see a savings there. Our part-time also increased by an incremental amount. That was $3,000. The reason for that is strictly for during our busiest times. We really want to make sure we're doing our due diligence to keep the building clean and covered. And so that was just to enable us on those busy tournament weekends to add an additional part-time staff member to our team for that purpose. Not a new hire, just someone who's already in existence, but giving them a couple more hours during those really busy times. operating supplies, it shows a 30% increase of $15,000. That's strictly historical use. Looking at our numbers, that operational supply line has been high and over the last few years. That right now is strictly historical use, so that's where that adjustment comes in. Really, the utilities, we're not projecting a big increase in electric or in gas. We are projecting that 15% increase to water and sewer, but overall for all of our utilities, just a 2% increase there. And then really the biggest number is our building repair. And part of that is historical use. That's been getting a lot of use. We've had minor issues with the ice plant that goes into building. But the major component to that is working with Derek Belanger and Mark. We're 5 years into the existence of this ice plant, and working with our maintenance contract and mechanical services, and also Derek and Mark, we felt the need to budget for a compressor replacement every year moving forward. We're not saying it's going to happen, but we've seen as components start to fail that we'd rather have it built into our budget to know that we can replace that compressor on a yearly basis as we keep going moving forward. These compressors have proven in the Cube system to have about a 5 to 6 year lifespan. So every compressor is 5 years old at this point. I currently have one compressor, number 9, which is down. We are not repairing it right now. And we're planning on waiting to next year to have it budgeted to do so. But we are seeing that start to happen. So that existing compressor, which is down, will get repaired next year. And then that way we have it built in moving forward. And then the other smaller increase was $2,500 into our training and tuition, all for training purposes. The U.S. Ice Rink Association has done a remarkable job putting operational classes together. They have 3 classes at the operational level that make up a certified ice technician: ice making and painting technologies, ice maintenance and equipment operation, and also a basic refrigeration class, which we feel is really important for all of our guys to have a good grasp of all 3 pieces. Better quality ice comes from that. The more training they have, the better they can maintain the sheet, and ultimately that leads to energy savings and all the rest. And then, like we said, with our revenue and then our some cutbacks as well, we're planning a decrease of 22% in the overall budget.
And then just before we get into questions, I just wanted to talk about the new position. The new position, a facility of our size, most one-sheet ice rinks run with 3 to 4 full-time people. Typical, in doing some research and some benchmarking across other facilities in New England and across the country, the average full-time staff ratio for a 2-sheet ice facility is 7 full-time people, 3 people per rink, and then one overnight person to do ice maintenance and cleaning and that sort of thing. That position is just to kind of get us closer to that number. We know we can't ask for that number, especially in these times, but I think having a new position can also help offset, as Rory said, some part-time hours for some of our part-time individuals. And then on the on the maintenance line, we've had a lot of conversation with Derek and Mechanical Services. In the past years, there hasn't been really any consistency in having a good maintenance line of where that money's coming from. Everything's been pish posh around operating supplies and that sort of thing. We really want to kind of streamline that and have a better understanding of preventive maintenance every year, and have a really good solid maintenance line that is realistic. And that way you guys have an understanding that that's how the budget's going to come across. Open for questions for Norway.
I'll go, Councilor Walker.
Yeah. On last year, you show here going down the whole thing, 1,146,000. Is that projected, or is that actually what you did last year?
That was, I believe, projected.
Okay, so at the end of the year, and I know because we've got a shutdown and everything, you're never going to hit it. But
correct.
How close do you think you would have come to that projection if things stayed the way they were going?
Pretty close because we were going to add two non-event shows that we're going to bring in probably an additional 40,000. I think we were easily going to hit our $65,000 mark in events. So I believe we're going to be pretty close.
I agree. In addition, we had a really good hockey year. The Gladiators increased their usage by a small portion. We also added a couple other outside sources. We gave Casco Bay Youth Hockey some ice, Mid-Coast Youth Hockey used some ice. We were up in the ice usage as well. Unfortunately, our spring programs is where we're going to take that hit back. We had Dan Hodge and Gary Russo. We basically had Monday through Thursday booked all spring for spring clinics, as well as we cut the Gladiators tryout short because of our closure. So I think that's where the offset's going to come. But I agree with Mark. I think we were very, very close to hitting that number.
And Councilor Walker and all the councilors, just to let you know, this past July, we haven't gone up in our price in ice rental since the doors open at Norway. This past year, last July, we let all of our user groups know that we were going from $235 to $240 for this coming year. So we are going to be getting $5 more an hour from our user groups. Part of that letter also let them know that in the next following year, it's going to go up $5 again. So we are actually going to go up $10 total in the next 2 years in ice time. So in 2022, we're going to be looking at another $5 increase in ice rentals.
And that was for internal. That was for internal user groups. So external user groups. So if we get a group, say from Casco Bay, they're going up incrementally 10 and then 20. Our consistent user groups, so the Maine Gladiators, the high schools that work with us, they're going up 5 and then 10 incrementally. So we'll see that reflected on both.
What does that mean in real dollars? So how many hours per sheet? What's your total hours? I mean, roughly?
It's about 23,000, right, Rory?
Yeah, it's
hours.
We're at 235 an hour right now, so we're going to be at 240 and then 245, 250, 260. I'd have to run that report. I'll get that to you.
Okay, I'm just wondering how many hours you have cumulatively for internal groups and, like you said, your outside rentals, like the Gladiators. Who my nephew plays for the Gladiators, and I'll speak for him. Jack that price right up, $30-$40 an hour. My brother-in-law can afford it. Okay.
Last question for you there. Can you tell me what do you think is wrong with that one cube that's broken down, or do you really know?
No, it's been fully assessed by mechanical services. The compressor itself is bad. We just chose not to replace it at this time. One, it went down probably in December. The nice thing about a cube system is that we do have 8 others. So we're able to run just as efficiently. We honestly only run about 6 cubes at a time during the winter. So we were able to run just as efficiently without it. We wanted to build it into our budget before we made that repair. So we held off until, honestly, we were holding off until July. I think probably we're going to hold off a little bit further at this point.
Can you tell me the warranty we had on that? I can't remember it right now, but when we put it in, that was one of the things I had asked about, and I've forgotten now. What was for the whole system? I guess they had a breakdown of what was warranted, what wasn't.
Mark, I'm going to defer to you on that more than me.
We're going to look at it. The last I saw was 3 years, Councilor Walker, but I will go double check.
That's okay. Thank you. I guess I couldn't remember. That's all.
No, it's Councilor Walker. It's a good question. We'll do some research on it.
The cubes themselves too have now switched ownership groups. So Preferred Mechanical was the group that installed the guy who worked for Preferred no longer works for them and took the ownership of the actual cube system with him. So Preferred, although they're the experts because they installed this system, that specific gentleman who was the technician and engineer to this system no longer works for them. So there's a little bit of discrepancy there too. So we'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
Councilors, questions? Councilor McLeod?
Thank you. I think along with all of these, if we can get a return on investment on some of this stuff, especially CIP or stuff you're building in, how long could you go without that cube? Is that something that needs to be done this coming year, where you're saying you use 6? You know, something like that, just to give a little bit of a narrative on what is necessary to maintain our operations as we move forward. And
Sure.
I mean, we don't need it, but do we need it right now on a lot of this stuff? Is this something that can wait? Is a new Zamboni going to save us hundreds of thousands, or, you know, just little stuff like that, so we can make that judgment on this side to see, like, okay, the return on investment is here, so when we open back up, we're ready to go with certain items.
Sure. I mean, I think with the cube specifically, and I can talk to that right now, the one thing that you're going to find is that the way that the system is set up is that they run in a sequence. So they automatically change from a lead lag. So if we let one stay off for an extended period of time, the one thing that could happen is as we get to replacement, that one's going to be far behind the rest. And so you're going to get, just like you would a police vehicle, it reaches that mileage and you have to swap it over to a new vehicle. Similarly to a compressor, in theory, once you get to a certain amount of hours, you're going to have to do the same. That would be the only difference. Could we theoretically operate with 8 cubes? Yes. Yes, I'm very confident in that, except if we do operate both sheets in July, the challenge that we run into is that 8 cubes during the summer when it's 90 degrees and humid outside, that's when we really need the full system active. And we do tend to run July and August with both sheets in. So that'll be but in theory, yes, I believe 8 cubes would be sufficient.
And by building this into the budget now, it would be more of a scheduled type thing, so the money would be there as they break down.
Then basically, out of the 9 cubes, every 9 years, one's getting replaced, in theory, and then we don't have to worry about that. We just go through a standard rotation.
Perfect, thank you.
Any other council questions? No? Very good. I think we've covered this. I appreciate your time. I have some financial questions, but I'm going to save that for Jill, Mr. Manager. Appropriate?
That's fine.
Very good. Okay, let's move on to Ingersoll.
Jeremy, floor is yours, bud.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just to touch base on what Councilor Carrier asked earlier, we'll be saving quite a bit on utilities. Obviously, Ingersoll has been shut down since March 13th. Nobody's been in there, no lights, no water, nothing like that. Heat has been minimal just to keep the building from freezing. Luckily, we haven't had too many cold nights, but we'll definitely save a lot on utilities. It kind of runs hand in hand with the use of the building anyway, unlike Norway, where you constantly have to have the chillers going to keep the ice in. If we don't have programming, everything gets shut down or put at a minimum level. So we definitely will have some savings there as far as utilities go. Regarding the upcoming budget season, a couple of the big driving factors on increases. The first one being salaries. As Sabrina mentioned, we are shifting one full-time rec specialist under the Ingersoll budget. Previously, it was funded 50% from Ingersoll, 25% from general fund, and 25% from special revenues. So everything is being rolled under Ingersoll, that salary and fringe benefits. That's why the 10% increase. The next highest one would be our programming expense. We're starting to do more internal programming and not relying so much on outside rentals. So we're doing those programming. There's obviously equipment costs, officials, referees, trophies, different items like that that come along with them. We were able to start 2 new programs this year, a youth instructional program, Little Eddie Soccer. It was for 3 to 5-year-olds. Very successful. We actually capped out in year 1, I want to say in the first 2 to 3 weeks of open registration. And then we were about to roll out a new indoor soccer program for that 7 to 12-year-old range. It was going to be more of gameplay compared to instructional due to the current circumstances we're going through. That had to get shelved. Something we will look to do at the tail end of the fall, beginning of winter next year. So hopefully the interest is still there to carry that on. A couple of decreases, advertising, just kind of going hand in hand with what we've been spending historically, trying to pare that down to a more realistic level. Same with repairs. We've been using some historical data, figuring out what we have been spending for facility, equipment repairs, and starting to pare that down to, again, a realistic level of what we actually spend every year. But right now we're looking at a total revenue of a little over $18,000 for Ingersoll of FY21.
Any questions for Ingersoll?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Did anyone? Councilor Lasagna. I was looking at my notes.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is really helpful, and I'm always impressed how Ingersoll is a moneymaker for us. I wonder, I mentioned earlier the question about going ahead with the mezzanine and all the furniture for that in this current environment, because there isn't really a return on investment in that, as the mayor would say.
Yep.
It's more convenience for parents. And I wonder if there might be one fundraising with parents for it, because I bet they'd be motivated to at least help out with some of it. And also, I guess you wouldn't be using any of your income that you're making to support something like that. That's my one question about Ingersoll. Thank you.
Absolutely. And that we knew right off the bat that wasn't necessarily a return on investment. It was more of aesthetics, or I guess you could say a potential safety, putting people up higher away from the netting. But there's definitely no true return on investment with adding the mezzanine, especially right now with everything going on.
And Holly, just to kind of piggyback on that too, you're going to see through the CIP, we also talked in our tour when we walked around, possibly about doing a feasibility study too, and taking some money to study potential sites, or maybe the need for a full-size turf facility. So I think that's something that we're also open to looking at, using some of that. If we, again, mezzanine for me is just safety, just because of the netting. But at the same time, I think we're also open to, possibly using that also for a feasibility study to look at future needs and future revenue options.
If I could, we're talking about reopening. Have you illustrated a plan that shows your break even, or let's say we have a slow rolling recovery and easing of social distancing? Don't quote me on those terms. Could you do pitching practice, batting practice, certain activities with those activities that you can isolate that promote good social distancing? At what level or frequency would it make sense to actually reopen with those activities? Almost like a break-even analysis applied to social distancing.
I've actually I haven't shared this with anybody, but just in my time that I've been working here, I've been trying to start to think about that as we get closer possibly to the uplifting of this, social distancing aspect. I don't have the numbers yet around that, but let me run that through with the staff once I'm done, and then we can possibly see.
It's good to know that you all have been thinking about it and working on it, because obviously recreation, getting you back in that bare minimal to break even. Because as you said, Jeremy, you guys are shut down tight. Everything's turned off, and hopefully you still know where the key is. But when you open that building back up again, what is needed to justify opening that building up?
And I think the beauty with Ingersoll is we don't really ramp up until that Thanksgiving timeframe, where everybody's outside from now until end of the fall season. It becomes as needed, depending on rain or weather. We could sustain, because I usually take a hit July through November anyway. We could sustain through November, December if it really lasts that long. Or like you said, start pairing into and I don't want to say private one-on-one lessons, but small group or instructional. We do a lot of that anyway, but we could really promote that a lot more and really do safe distancing. Only have a coach and a player in each half or one cage, and still have a little bit of revenue coming in, or at least just having people come in, having that feel good, get out, do something, and not be cooped up like we have.
Yeah, that's the other aspect too. It's the psychological aspect of recovery and feeling good and exercise. So it's not just a revenue generated argument, but it's also for the social well-being. Okay, well, thank you. I'm just glad that you all are thinking about that, and when you're ready, and hopefully when we as a community are ready, we can share that. Okay. Any other questions, Councilor Lasagna?
I just wanted to mention before we move off of recreation and sports tourism that I continue to support the new scheduling software, even at this point, because it would be a good time to actually do kind of a dry run with it to see how it works. And I wonder if that is different from what Sabrina is talking about in terms of them needing money for some new scheduling. And I don't know if that was software or what that was exactly.
No, that was all in one. We're actually sending out the RFP tomorrow to these companies, and we're hoping to get all of our proposals in by May 15th.
That's great. Thank you. I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Councilor Boss?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentations. I'm really interested in hearing more about the CIP line, talking about connecting Hasty and Ingersoll. I see that it's $20,000 for getting drawings to have some options, but can you explain a little bit more about how that increases safety? And also if you have an idea for what a ballpark would be for the actual physical connecting of those two buildings?
I know Sabrina, piggyback on my comments here if you want to. We don't necessarily, I don't know if there's been like a whole quote around the whole project. But from a safety standpoint, yeah, I mean, it allows us to really kind of have a connection there. There do vehicles that do drive between, Hasty and Ingersoll. It would provide a nice connectivity point. And also from a staffing standpoint too, when we have staff on hand in the evening, having them connected, that doesn't feel so separate. But I know that's for the drawings. Sabrina, do you know if we've, on your end, if you had the overall cost put into play, or is it just?
No, that would be something that would be addressed with the drawing, design, cost estimate, that package.
Hey, Mark, I'm wondering, just because a couple of these questions are going into your the rest of your presentation,
yeah,
it might be good for us to go back to the presentation, and then you're able to address the CIP items.
Is there any other operational items before we do that, which is a great idea? Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I got a couple questions. One is recreation superintendent. Would you explain to me exactly what that title covers and how, what is the broad area? And then I'll ask you the other question after that one.
Yeah, so that is what Jeremy's title is. So he is still the general manager of Ingersoll. And then he is that first go-to person for the programmers. That was really because of how much off-site stuff that myself, the director, was doing, and the staff not having an immediate go-to person. So that allowed Jeremy to have the authority to help direct them, make decisions within the rec department, and really kind of connect Ingersoll and recreation.
And Sabrina, correct me if I'm wrong, he also has a bigger play too at the Auburn Senior Community Center as well.
Yeah, and with having that rec programmer transition more into Ingersoll, that helped freed up his plate so that way he could take on that rental side and scheduling side of the Senior Community Center.
Okay, second question, recreation specialist. What is this person expected to be, and what does that person cover?
So that position is Jamie. She's currently serving in that role. So it's 30 hours. She is assigned to the senior age 50 and over programming. That is her real well.
Okay, I guess a little further. How did it happen to fall under the Ingersoll turf facility? I guess I'm missing something here.
Sorry, I might have confused you. I thought you were referring to the rec increase. Are you?
No, it just says recreation specialist, 42,900. I'm not sure how this connects. I can't figure that out.
So that position, that programmer is Darcy. She oversees the youth indoor softball league, the Auburn Invaders softball league that started out of Ingersoll. She has taken over the adult sports leagues that we offer through Ingersoll. She does still do some programming under the rec well, like the farmers indoor and outdoor farmers market. And along with the youth lacrosse, youth football, those items typically spend a good portion in the turf facility due to our weather. So it made sense to have that shift where, that person can be the guru, so to speak, of Ingersoll as Jeremy's responsibility shifted.
And that position was previously filled by Mike. He split half of his time with Ingersoll, half of his time with the seniors, fitness. So he was more of a 50-50 split between Ingersoll and the other rec programs that he used to oversee when he was here.
Thank you. Yeah, that really helps with my mind anyways. I guess my last question is, well, probably won't be the last one, but anyways, my next question, I've asked it, I guess for the last 3 years. When are we gonna know what we are losing by not operating or being able to operate through July, August, September, because we don't have some type of an airflow, air conditioning unit in the facility? I don't understand why we can't get that answer. I think it's a very simple one overall. You need to call somebody, have them come down, look at what we have, and then you, as a person that rents the facility, should be able to tell us, is there anybody out there that would use it? And what would our profit be? And how long would it take to pay back what it would cost us to put in such a unit? And hooking the two buildings together, I think is a great idea. We wanted to do that 20 years ago, and it never got done because it never got through a budget. But I'll leave it at that. And, thank you for everything you do.
I've talked to other directors of indoor facilities throughout the state, one being the pitch up in Warren. It's probably the newest indoor turf facility in the state of Maine. There's not a single facility in the state that has AC in it. They didn't feel, and again, it's a different area, different demographic. They didn't feel they had enough demand during the summertime to install that. Some of the other ones have been built and around for the last 15, 20 years. So I'm sure it was just never in their thought process. But the newest one in the state, they looked into it, but the cost didn't make sense for the lack of 100% committed groups coming in during the summertime.
And then Council Walker, it's also hard to compete with Mother Nature when a lot of people are outside on the fields in the summer. We also have a limitation on sealing during this, with activities in Ingersoll because it's not a full ceiling. As Jeremy said, we called actually some people and some other facilities, and they felt that the air conditioning system, especially the pitch and Warren, they felt that it wasn't conducive from a revenue standpoint. They didn't have enough revenue during the summer to operate air conditioning during, in their facility, and they allow the kids to use the outside fields.
Obviously, the big difference between those facilities is they're all privately owned, whereas we are obviously municipally. So they have a harder bottom line, I guess, because it's their actual facilities that they own and operate.
Well, I like to take the word of other people in other places too, but I still think it's something that we should exercise ourselves through, because I think, the council would really like to see what it would cost us, and is there an advantage to air conditioning in the building? And I think there would be different people that would use the building in the summertime other than sports people. So I think there's something, if we think out of the box, that may work, and maybe it will never work. I don't know, but I just, I leave it with you. And if we can't do it, that's a different story. But if we just don't do it because we don't want to do it, maybe I can get a couple other counselors to come on board with me. And at that point, we can make it a direction to the manager that we get it done.
Okay. So with that, if we could,
thank you for the feedback, Councilor Walker.
We need to take a break at this point. I'd like to, stop. We've been going at this pretty darn hard for 2.5. So, let's any other questions on rec, comments, let's direct them by email. Okay. So at this point, we're going to stand in recess for 10 minutes if we could, please. Thank you. And welcome back, citizens of Auburn, to this year's budget discussions. I'm your host, Mayor Levesque, and welcome, City Council. We're going to pick right back up with Recreation, Sports, Tourism. Mark Goslin.
Thank you. Man, that's a great intro. I like that. Thank
Working
you.
on that one.
So just to run through the rest of the presentation, I also wanted to inform the counselors that we weren't ignoring the fact that we have a lot of great work that's been done with the strategic plan. The strategic plan itself was not just the city councilors and staff, but it's also the community that came and gave their impact. And we took our budget drivers and we made sure our budgets hit as many part of the strategic plan as possible. And so what we kind of figured throughout everything that we went through with the budget, and we went through line item by line item, and we were able to hit six of the strategic plan items with our budget drivers in our total budget. Sports tourism and marketing. I appreciate Councilor Lasagna bringing that up earlier, as it is a big part of us moving forward. And corporate partnerships. And thank you, Mayor, for bringing that up. Sports tourism and the Maine RV show. Unfortunately, our shows had to cancel this year because of the pandemic situation. But the Maine RV show actually renewed for an additional year on top of their contract because they missed out on this year. So we have a great partner in Kathy and Makoa and all of them that they actually have extended into 2023 for the RV show. The Maine golf show, unfortunately, one of our new shows got canceled. That's already on the docket for 2021. I didn't get to release this to you guys because we didn't get a chance to get further into it, but we are looking at hosting a boat show also at the arena in 2021. We were also up for bid for the National Collegiate Roller Hockey Championship for next year. Unfortunately, with the COVID crisis and the pandemic, Fort Myers, who has it this year, is going to get it next year. But the board of directors for the National Collegiate Roller Hockey Championships were very impressed with our bid, and they're going to be coming out here in June, hopefully, if travel restrictions are lifted. If not, we're going to do it by Zoom, but we're going to talk about the National Collegiate Roller Hockey Championships coming here in 2022. From a corporate partnership standpoint, everything's strong, and the mayor's right. These are the types of uncertainty situations where corporate businesses sometimes do kind of back off their support from a corporate partnership standpoint. We haven't seen it yet. I've been communicating with our corporate partners on a regular basis since we've started the pandemic. Not asking for money, but just kind of checking in and seeing how they're doing. And all good, positive conversation. For example, Cody Crane was up for renewal. They actually did renew with their partnership already during this time. So I'm encouraged by that. But, there are some potential opportunities where we might lose some corporate partners, not because they don't want to be with us. This might have hit them a lot harder than expected. And then also what's nice, because of everything that's going on, we are talking about some media agreements. We've had a good conversation with Channel 6 to support us on some of the shows, and also some radio stations. And they're actually looking at some visibility in the arena. So those are the things that we're kind of looking forward to for this coming budget year. Some of the CIP items that we talked about in our tour and what City Manager Creighton put in, from a recreation division standpoint, we had Union Street Park, Pettingill Baseball Park, and the senior center phase. Those are the ones that put in this year, but I just didn't want to dismiss some of the other items that we have for coming future years, such as, looking at security systems for Pettingill and Top Lot. But, we're looking at Union Street, Pettingill, and the next part of the senior center phase. There's still a lot of things that we need to do with the senior center to again, make it the place that we want it to be and be able to rent it and have user groups be extremely happy with it. And that's a PA system. That's also a refrigerator. There's still a lot of utilities that we need to buy for the senior center as that third phase. With Ingersoll, we talked about the mezzanine, which was presented. We also think a possible feasibility study could be useful to help us evaluate our ROI on whether a full-size turf facility would be great in our community. Looking at sites, we also believe the mezzanine is important from a safety standpoint. The netting is so close for our spectators that we're just worried that we're just buying time before something serious happens over at Ingersoll with the viewing area. Some of the other things that we've already talked about in coming up with later CIP years. Exterior signage, getting new exterior signage for the Ingersoll turf facility, but also connecting Hasty at some point, as Councilor Walker mentioned, and other people have mentioned that it could be a good thing. Councilor Boss, it allows us some flexibility if we're able to connect it in safety and really kind of making that whole area just one. From Norway Savings Bank Arena, a couple CIP items that the city manager put in for this year is the RO water treatment system and the portable stage. I'll talk about those two. The RO water treatment system really is just a system that removes some impurities in the water, whether it be dissolved minerals, salts, and it allows it to kind of like allow our plant to work a lot smoother. Taking out those impurities will cut down energy cost. We're looking at less energy to freeze the ice. They say, and Rory and I have talked about this a lot. A lot of the research says that, every degree that you're able to increase your slab to freeze the ice, you're able to get about, 6% savings in energy use. So for example, if we're at 18 degrees and we have the water treatment system, and we're able to freeze the ice at 20 degrees. That's about probably a 12% savings in our energy usage. Also, not just from energy usage, but it makes a better quality of ice, so less maintenance on top of that as well. And then the portable stage, I brought this up during our tour. We have a for-profit business. This would be a partnership, a public-private partnership with a company in our area that will help us purchase the stage and work on an agreement where, we're able to cut our cost in half in purchasing the stage, and they would allow us to utilize the facility stage at no cost, and then limited cost on the kind of audio and visual equipment. And then on the other side of the agreement, they would be able to rent it out for their own services, and then we would also get a percentage of the rental agreement. We're still, kind of going through that process right now, but they're very excited. The pandemic situation could affect that, depending. They are a business that's getting severely affected by the pandemic situation, but they're still very interested in reaching out to the agreement because this could be something that boosts them past the pandemic. Other things that are part of that, that was part of that slide, was just the mezzanine furniture that we need to upgrade, some rubber flooring replacement, and a vehicle trailer that we all talked about in the tour when we walked around the arena. So the last two slides, I just really wanted to talk about the COVID impact, the pandemic, just the past 2 months. And now this is going up to the end of this month. This is not stretching into May or June. Recreation programming, we have lost about $18,000, $18,677. And not only that, it's just the amount of people that we're not able to see, and the psychosocial aspect of recreation that you guys are all talking about that has really affected us in our community. Ingersoll in the past 2 months, is going to lose about $54,000 in programming revenue. And unfortunately, at the Norway Savings Bank Arena, losing the shows and losing the ice time, we were sitting at $92,405. A grand total of $165, unfortunately, lost revenue because of the pandemic. And Mayor brought up a good point. We are going to start analyzing how we might be able to turn that. Right now, the business trade show is slated for June. We have not canceled it yet. We're still trying to find maybe back dates that we might be able to do that. So we're trying to do our best not to cancel future events. So that way, that's all dependent on the situation. And talking about recovery, I think a lot of you brought up some great points and asking some questions about how each department's handling the recovery, especially moving past this, and why is recreation important to that recovery step. And a lot of it is just, getting back to some sense of normalcy, bringing some joy back to the community. It's a very tough time for a lot of people, mentally, socially. A lot of people are impacted because of unemployment. And think about there are a lot of families that are very social, and they go out with their children and they do a lot of different types of things. Recreation will allow them to give them that channel to do that, and hopefully bring that back to them. Hopefully we're able to address the psychological part of this and the impact the pandemic has, and maybe provide that counseling, so to speak, to help them get through it. this is the time to focus on those kind of recreational and cultural activities to get people back out. We're hoping the parade is one of those things that people just celebrate, that, we're able to kind of celebrate that, right? With, the pandemic lifting, hopefully keeping our fingers crossed that's the case. And we want to continue that growing sense of community and economic growth. And, I'd be remiss in not bringing this up. With Sabrina's leadership and the staff, in that food grab and go program is a perfect example of how recreation has stepped up to the plate and saying, hey, look, this is what we do. We serve the community. We serve you. How can we help? There's nothing better when a group of people come together and do things for other people. I'm extremely proud of Sabrina. I'm extremely proud of our staff. And honestly, I'm proud of our city. I mean, there's so many people, all of you might have pitched in and volunteered at some point down there. City staff, other people in our city staff have volunteered at the grab and go program. It was a great team effort. And that's what recreation is. And I think that program is a good example how we're going to be able to impact recovery past, the craziness that we're living in right now. And I'll open up for questions. How was that, Mayor? Is that all right? Good time.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the third time we've seen the CIP presentation in the last month. So I think we can all recite it verbatim too, but it gives us more time to ask questions. Namely this, your COVID-19 loss right now projected 165K. Is that gross or net?
Gross.
Do you have your net number for that same time period?
I don't.
Can you provide that to us, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Open this up to other questions, Council. Council Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Going back, how many employees do you have in your rec department, full-time and part-time total?
So we have 13. We have a total of 13 full-time people. Sabrina, from a part-time standpoint, it's everything from our regular part-time staff. Is that also including Councilor Gary also wanting to know like summer camp individuals?
That's a short term, just just a month or so. But I'm thinking more of full-time salaries and benefits.
Okay, 13 full-time.
And to be clear, though, the rec, those 13 positions are spread across all these different budgets. So the rec budget itself covers the director, the admin assistant, and facility maintenance, and then it's technically 3 employees, one of which is a permanent part-time at 30 hours and not the 37 and a half hours. So the department as a whole is 13, which includes all the different divisions.
Thank you.
Councilor McLeod.
Thank you. Were those CIP slides in order of importance as they were numbered, or is that just where they fell?
That was when we originally put them together. They were order of importance. They're all important to us, honestly, Councilor McLeod. It's one of those things. We understand we're in a tight situation from a budget standpoint. We understand that.
My second question was about phase 3.
Yes.
The only justification in here was a refrigerator, freezer, tables, chairs, and audio visual for $75,000. Is there more to that, or is that the entire list?
No, that's the entire list, but the audio visual component is a very expensive component.
Okay.
Yeah, just to give an idea, when we were getting initial quotes for the center through the CDBG funding, just the AV system and equipment and everything like that and the setup was $100,000, and that was quickly, cut off of, taken off the plate. So we're doing what we can, the best that we can right now, but definitely through this feeding program, we've recognized the fridge, the freezer, some other kitchen equipment, washer and dryer, increased in tables and chairs because we only have enough right now for 200, but our capacity really is 300. So those kinds of items.
Was that AV new, or like brand new out of the box, or was that like a new system?
That was a new system.
Okay, thanks.
Any other counselors? Counselor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Quick follow-up. Sabrina, one of the major things we need at the senior center is a new hot water tank. Our tank that we have isn't big enough to run the dishwasher. Where does that show up in the budget?
Correct. That is part of the CIP project. It just is not listed in the detail part.
Okay. How much was the quote for the replacement of the hot water tank?
Jeremy, you might chime in here too, but
Off the top of my head, I don't remember what.
the pond building is the only thing that's sticking in my head right now, but we could find that pretty quickly. And
We'll get that to you.
Thank you.
I think just from being in that kitchen during the Grab and Grow program and being in other kitchens, yeah, it needs a new kitchen. That is not a safe. It's not a healthy kitchen. It should not be usable, in my opinion. And probably if you ask any other restaurateur, they'd agree with me. So I definitely think we need that capital improvement or else we won't have an asset to use. Question on finances. I just want to make sure the council is aware that there's a $400,000 line item expense under Norway Savings Bank Arena this year, which flowed into the fund balance as a transfer. This is some of the refinancing of Norway Savings Bank Arena during the end of the last term, if memory serves me correctly. Yeah, we approved that, I believe, in August of 2019. Yes. So it's before this current council. I'm going to ask Jill for a breakdown, a specific itemized breakdown. I'm sure she's listening, so she can give her a little heads up on that. Exactly how much money we saved during the refinance for the year-to-date fiscal year, and how that money was appropriated. I also will say, or ask this question, Mr. Manager, probably to you. The last council asked specifically for that money, the savings to be itemized, reported back when we knew a number to the city council for determination of where that money would go, how that would be expended. That didn't happen. Can we know why?
Well, Jill can talk about that when she speaks, but actually the amount that we thought we would have was less. So
why did it not come back and get reported to council is actually my question.
Well, I don't think there was any,
There was directive.
intentionally didn't do that. I don't think with everything going on, I don't think it came up as an issue.
So this $400,000 line item is not correct.
No, the $400,000 line item has gone into the debt service. Again, Jill can talk about that when she speaks. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any other questions for recreation? None? Oh, Councilor Walker, I didn't see your hand.
I know it's small on the screen, ain't it? Huh?
No, it's big. It's just I thought it was your head.
Thank you. I don't want to get into a lot of detail, but the Norway Arena, ice arena, the water treatment system, I don't think is something that we need right now, and I don't think it's going to save us enough compared to what it costs to put it in. And I talked with the manager, and I'm not going to get into all kinds of details, other than I did this kind of work just like you're doing, and I believe there's other ways you can have better ice and do a better job with the ice other than buying that water treatment. The other thing I have still a problem with the portable stage. I like the way you've gone out and trying to partner with that, but I'm not happy with the details. I think we really need to see the real deal in writing on if you want it on the 4th of July and someone wants to rent it on the 4th of July and they need it on the 4th of July, who's going to get it? And I don't want you to tell me right now, they said you will. Please find out that and let us read that contract that you're saying you're out there to deal with. That's all I have to ask. Thank you.
You got it, Councilor Walker. Thank you.
Is there any other questions for recreation at this time, Councilor McLeod?
Just to piggyback off what Councilor Walker said for the CIPs, like the RO treatment, compared to what you're doing now, any return on investment calculations you can come up with, just to kind of help us guide, that'd be great.
Yeah, so real quick on that. So with the RO, right now they project 6% savings per degree. On average, research shows you can run your slab 2 degrees warmer. which would be approximately 12%. Let's say we cut that in half and go to 3%. With the 3% savings, we're looking at an ROI of about 3.5 years and about $10,000 per year in electrical cost. Now that's projected. That's not that is on research on ice plants across the country and in Canada. That's not specifically our building, but that's what it looks like. Essentially, with the RO system, it removes the total dissolved solids out of the water. Pure ice, less air. You can run your slab warmer, and you can, in theory, use less water every time you flood. That's the investment. I think our team does a fantastic job, and truly, I think we have the best sheet of ice in the state. But my job is to sell it, and the best way to sell it is to continue to improve it. And so that's why we decided to put it in there.
And that ROI would be the current electricity rates, right? Based on what we're currently getting.
Correct. I mean, we're paying, last year we were close to 200,000 in electric. I would say 25% of that is probably lights and everything else. 75% to 70% is the ice plant. So 150,000, you divide that into the 12%, you're at about just under 10,000. So you'd have a 3.5 at 3%. Sorry, you'd be just under 10,000. You'd be about 18,000 at 6% if you got the full 6%. So you'd have a 2-year ROI at 6% or 3.5 at the 3% rate, which is 50% of what everybody else is approximately getting.
Okay, I'd like to move on at this point. It's 8:32. Any other questions I think should be submitted via the new website and the link that we have. So thank you very much, Mark and team.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay well.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Let's go into
Mark.
Mr. Manager Tiff, I believe.
Yes, Jill Eastman, the finance director, is up next. Jill's going to talk about TIFs and also is going to talk about the tax sharing agreement, and we'll address other issues as well. Jill, are you connected?
I am.
Okay.
I'm going to do the TIFs first. That's the line item in the budget that says TIF transfers. What that is when you approve the TIFs, you approve a certain percentage of the tax revenue be captured and put into a special fund to either be used for credit enhancement agreement for the developer or for a lot of times we'll do capital improvements, infrastructure, that type of thing. And so it's used to pay debt service. So that amount in the budget is the total amount of those captured values of the new revenue that have been authorized in all the TIF agreements that we have so far. And it's transferred into the TIF fund. And then from there, we pay the credit enhancement agreements, we pay debt service out of that money. That's what that is. Does anyone have questions about that?
Could you, what page in our budget book is that TIF breakdown?
You don't have a copy of that.
Can we?
It's always that way.
Can we please?
I can send it to you. Yeah.
It doesn't have to be right now, but I mean, in the near future, I think.
I'll send it to you. I don't have it available right this minute, but
that's fine. No, that's fine.
I can send it to you. There's a spreadsheet that is done.
I remember seeing it. I remember seeing it during our monthly finance reports, but again, those are monthly. I believe that's, or at least that's some of the TIF fund accounts. We see partial details.
There's a special, when I give you the special revenue funds, they're part of that.
Okay.
And they're broken down by each TIF.
Yes.
But yes. I can give you the actual spreadsheet that shows you what the total assessed value is, what the captured value is, what goes into the TIF fund, and what goes to the general fund. I have that available.
That'd be very helpful. Thank you. Any other questions on TIF for Jill? No, I think we're clear. I think we're clear to move on, Jill.
Okay, and then at the last meeting, you got there were some questions about tax sharing, and We have a tax sharing agreement with the city of Lewiston for the airport, the air park, which is industrial park around the airport. And there's also some other properties that are in the spin-off area, and it's all part of an agreement that was signed many moons ago when the airport was developed. So what happens every year is the assessor gives me the valuations of all of the properties in this air park, and we share a portion of those property taxes with Lewiston. The city of Auburn gets 30% off the top, and then the rest of it is split 50-50 for the air park. There's also some excise tax that's included in that tax sharing agreement, which the airport gets a portion of, and then Lewiston gets a portion after we get our 30% off the top. So the total amount for this current year, FY20, that we're going to be paying Lewiston is just under $200,000 for that tax sharing agreement. On the other side of that, we receive money from the city of Lewiston for the Monty Hydro. And the budgeted amount of that is $165,000. So that's a revenue that we get back from Lewiston. So actually, we're a little bit on the negative side, but those were the agreements that were made long before I came here.
Jill, I'm not going to say it's a bad agreement, actually. If we get 30% off the top on the airport rev share, I'd imagine that's a categorization of hosting fee or something.
It's basically for police and fire coverage, that type of public works, all that. They figure those costs for us because they're in our city. Mm-hmm. And so we have other costs associated with running that whole place.
And I'm sure Lewiston probably does the same thing with Monty Hydro too on their end, and that's
right.
Probably acceptable. Could you, now that you have the number or that you've told us the number that you pay out, I can't sit here and do the math backwards, but if you don't have it handy, could you also send out to us how much we bring in from the air park and associated properties? Net of what we pay out.
I can give you what the total taxes are. I figured it out today so that I have this in front of me for this year's. And so the total taxes that are generated from the air park properties, this would be personal property and real estate, is $472,277.
Okay.
So our retainage off the top is $141,683. And then we split the balance 50-50. So we get another $165,300.
So $211, almost $212,000.
For that, yes. And then on the excise tax, we get a net of about let's see. We get net off the top $24,274 out of the total of $60,000. We get 40% on the excise.
Only 40% on excise?
Yeah. And then on the other properties, there's two other sets of properties: the St. Lawrence and Atlantic Railway, and then stuff that's part of the intermodal, I think is what it is. It just says spin-off, so I'm not exactly sure where it is. I think one of the other properties was it's a building that's just on the other side of the railroad tracks, or just before the railroad tracks, and it used to be a paper plant,
cardboard, or mulch block. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I can't remember. I don't know who owns it now, but that's part of it.
So direct economic stimulus in that area to the city of Auburn is roughly $236,000 and change annually.
Yeah,
and I just want to kind of get to that number. It's something that's always kind of buzzed around, but as we think about how we're funding LA Airport, and we're looking at CIPs, we're looking at what our contribution to the operations overhead is. A portion of that has been and is being offset by revenue split on those industries that wouldn't exist without the air park. So, yeah, that's good to know. That's good to know. Just kind of puts it into a little bit more perspective. Any questions for Jill on rev share? Okay. Moving on. Do you have workman's comp, Jill, or is that Chris Muma?
That's Chris. Water and sewer. That's basically what it is. It's a catch basin maintenance fee and the public fire protection fee. And the public fire protection fee went up 25% this year.
So to give an update to the council on this, I've asked the trustees to look at paying us an in-kind or in lieu of property tax fee that would equal the difference between a 15% increase and a 25.3% increase, or around $66,000. The Auburn Water Department is now evaluating that or lowering their overall rates in general to the entire ratepayer community in Auburn, which would accomplish as a municipality about the same deduction. So I just want to let you know that there is hopefully, Steve Milks, this is on you to represent the city council here to make sure we're doing what's right for the ratepayer and the city.
Roger that.
That's it for me. Chris is going to do workers' comp, and if she has questions, I'm here to answer.
Jill, I have a couple questions if I could ask. They're somewhat related, but they're finance related. The $400,000 that was transferred from Norway Savings Bank into the general fund, that's showing up as a line item expense. Those were the proceeds, if you would, lack of a better term, post our refinancing of the arena. Can we get a detailed breakdown on that number, or the exact number, when it was transferred, realized? We just haven't had a report back on when that bond was issued and what the after effect was.
I can give you all that on the bond. The money hasn't been transferred. What that was because they weren't paying rent anymore, they were going to give money to the general fund to offset the debt service payment. That's what that 400 was. And it hasn't been transferred yet, but
to offset the debt service payment, so it go into the general fund or the fund balance?
It goes into the general fund as a revenue. It was a revenue on the general fund side, expense on Norway side to help offset the payment for the debt service that is in the city's general fund.
Yep. If you could just provide us with a breakdown of that, would be great.
Yeah, and you also had a question about the overtime. Somebody had a question about overtime for special events.
Yes, earlier. Yes, it seems that it's allocated as an expense in separate departments for the same event.
It is. It was in the city manager's budget for quite a few years, and I believe it was a couple of years ago they decided that it should show in the each budget of whichever department it belonged in. So whether it was police or fire, it's now in each of their budgets instead of the manager's budget.
Mr. Manager, I'd like to kind of maybe a latter point. We need to look back at all this, because when I see the after action reviews for special events, for example, Norway Savings Bank, our Sesquicentennial, I see a line item in recreation as a cost item for what, and then I see it reflected in budget for overtime for public works, police, fire, etc. But if we have it as an expense and it's coming off the budget allocated for the event, but it's also showing and being budgeted for the preceding year as a line item for overtime and PD, then it seems to me that we're double counting that monies.
Well, I don't think that's the case. In terms of the city manager's office, what was happening is there was money in the city manager's office that was budgeted for the special details that the police department was doing. I don't know how that ever happened. So we just made a change with the cooperation of the police chief at the time, assistant city manager now, Phil Kroll. to have it show up in the police department where the actual expense was occurring. That was what happened with the issue. In terms of the overall issue that you're asking about, I'll talk with Jill and we'll confer on that and give you a response. Okay.
To break it down for the counselor's benefit, if we had a budget of 25,000 for New Year's Auburn,
right,
5,000 was for overtime. We accounted for that, which meant we could only spend 20,000 on the bands, whatever, everything else. So what I'm wondering is if the police department already had $5,000 budgeted for that event in overtime or the fire, what happened to that $5,000 and that $25,000 set aside? Where did it go? Because it obviously wasn't transferred to the PD because they already had it accounted for. Does that make sense, Council, Mr. Manager? See what I'm saying?
That was my question too when I looked at that line item.
Yeah, we will give you the answer on that. I don't think it's as complex as what you're thinking. We'll give you an answer on that.
Okay, very good then. Well, we'll relay that to the council too.
Yeah.
Councilor Walker has a question.
Yeah, catch basin maintenance fee. Why do we? What prompts us to pay $12,500 to the water district, sewer district?
That's been there, Leroy, Councilor Walker, for as long as I know. I don't know the answer to your question. It's always been there, and that's something I need to talk to Dan about. But that's what it's for. That's what it's for, that amount that's in that budget. But I don't know how it ever came about. It's been there as long as I can remember.
Well, I think we should make a recommendation that we don't pay them the $12,500. We'll find out exactly why it's there. I can't believe that we're paying them for our catch basins because they might be an overflow with a big storm or something. We could probably think of 100 reasons, but $12,500 every year is a lot of money if we just given $12,500 to them. They should have been giving us that for years and years, allowing them to have a beautiful building on a corner that we should have built our police department on.
I think Jill has a good point. We'll follow up with Dan. Go
Peter,
ahead.
I am here.
Oh,
you're still here. Okay.
Yes. That fee was charged to us for the work they do in determining where CSOs exist, the combined sewer overflows. I believe we stopped receiving that bill last year when they assumed that they were done with our CSOs, that they had found them all, and they started, or 2 years ago, they started charging that to us again because they are not done. So in terms of the agreement, Peter, we discussed with the water district sharing the cost of finishing the CSO program. That $12,500, I believe we can use towards that shared cost. But I can get back to you on that and check with the water district and get back to the council.
Very good.
Thank you, Dan.
Didn't they do a study or a review a few years back? I don't know exactly how many, but again, this is one of them things that just goes on and on and on forever. We as a city was going to have this done a long time ago because we were so far ahead of the other city, and yet something like this comes back to cost us money. I mean,
they assumed that they were done. Well, they had done what they knew of 3, 4, maybe 5 years ago, but the CSO flows and overflows kept occurring. So that's when last year you saw they were doing smoke testing around City Hall. They were doing it in specific parts of the city where they saw increased flow during rainstorm events.
Yep.
So with that smoke testing and the testing they did, they found that they aren't complete, that there still are illegal connections to the sewer system with the storm drain system. Most of it is roof drains, not catch basins. So now we're trying to get rid of those roof drains, and that's what they have left to do. At least that's what they think they have left to do.
Thank you.
They also have one at the Hannaford by that. There's a housing.
There's a catch basin in that drive, yes, in that low parking lot that we're not quite sure how we're going to eliminate, but yes.
Exactly. And then we've got 2 CSOs left, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
So we are going to pay the 12,500, or we don't have to pay it?
I will determine that. I believe we can use that as part of our match for an agreement we made to help pay for some of the catch basin work. So that 12,500 will just help offset something we've already agreed to pay for.
Thank you.
Yeah, very good then. I think we can move on.
So are you ready for the workers' compensation presentation? Chris,
Yes, I am. Can you hear me all right?
we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. With the workers' comp budget, the big difference between last year and this year, I believe that's last year's figures in that first column. There was a salary line in there. Back in 2008, Ray Lucier became the safety director for the city of Auburn. He left, and we replaced him with the deputy chief. Matt Fifield is the new safety director. That salary line was removed from the workers' comp budget and put into the fire department budget. Prior to that, Ray was a part-time employee, and so it was placed in the workers' comp budget. And that's the big differences between the 2 years together. If you put them side by side, it's just that salary line has been removed. The budget drivers, once the slide flips, the biggest budget drivers under the workers' comp, we are self-assured. We pay for our injuries. Number one is age-related injuries. 3/4 of our workforce are physically active in their positions. So it could be carrying a stretcher down a flight of stairs, or tackling a suspect, or lifting a sofa during spring cleanup. There's a lot of repetitive motion in all 3 of those large departments. That is primarily physical labor, and that takes its toll on the body. The state of Maine is an aging workforce, and the city of Auburn is no different on that. The next big driver would be the post-traumatic stress disorder presumptive law. In 2017, the legislature passed a law that stated, just by sheer nature of the job, for police and fire and other public safety personnel, that they were exposed to things that would cause PTSD. This was inevitable, and therefore the presumption is that any PTSD suffered by public safety would be considered workers' comp. And in 2015, there was another presumptive law put on municipalities also that stated that it's the presumption law on cancer for firefighters. And what that is again, as they're fighting fires, they're exposed to chemicals from burning plastics and other debris. All that falls on their turnout gear. They go back to the station, they take their turnout gear off. Those particles, those fine particles, are now spread throughout the building. It's where they eat, it's where they sleep, in addition to the trucks being parked in the garage that give exhaust, even though we have some safety catches there. Some of that still gets into their eating and sleeping quarters. And so the law assumes that if a firefighter gets cancer, certain types of cancer, it's a pretty extensive list, that it is considered workers' comp. This is another really good argument for a public safety building where we can remove the firefighters from the areas where the turnout gear and the garage is. And that's it. Any questions?
Councilor Lasagna?
Hi, Chris, can you go back to the first slide and just scroll it up a tiny bit? Because I couldn't see the totals at the bottom. If there were totals at the bottom. The very first slide that had. Okay, now I can see them. Oh,
Sorry.
that was the one. Okay, and the left is the last year's and the right is this year's?
Correct.
Okay.
That salary line is now part of the fire department deputy
Yeah.
chief salary.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you so much. Okay.
Councilor McLeod?
All right, 2 questions. One, do you know roughly how much we save by self-insuring ourselves through workers' comp?
I, not off the top of my head, back in 2016, I believe it was, they did do a study to see if it would be worth our while to contract out. And the numbers came in that it just was not worth it, that we're better off being self-insured. We, Deputy Chief Fifield does a great job, along with each department has their own safety person within the department to do what we can to provide workplace safety. And so we do a good job with it. It's just that some of these things are inevitable.
And with the presumptive cancer law, some of that stuff is exponentially expensive. Have we had any of those types of claims that we've had to insure?
Currently, to date, we have not paid for any cancer presumption or cancer claims.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other
Councilor Mills?
questions?
Do we have an umbrella liability policy on top of being self-insured that we're paying for? Like
Jill?
Yes, we have what they call it's over a certain amount of money.
Yeah.
So over 500,000, we have insurance that we pay for.
Yeah, okay.
And they will cover any claim over 500,000. So we have to pay up to that amount, and then they will pay. It's called excess coverage.
That'll cover in case somebody does claim a cancer.
Yes.
Right.
Correct.
Are these claims consistent every year? The 450?
Actually, we've been we had a couple of years that we were pretty high over that, and that's about our average. That is the 450.
I think I did check for 2019. The claims total was 338,000.
Yeah,
so
we
a
did
little
do
shy of
well.
the 450.
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Any other questions for Chris? No? Well, great. Thank you very much. I'd wave, but my wrist hurts.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
I'll wave.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. That comes to the end of the presentations. We do have a council budget discussion right now. I'd like to poll the council to see how you feel, and I talked about this on Monday. I'd like to have a special workshop budget discussion on April 23rd. It's a Thursday at 5:30. Is everybody in favor of that? Yeah, I got enough people. I'll call that tomorrow. Mr. Manager, you're all set with that too? Can you staff that appropriately?
Yes, we will.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
I just want to be clear on the agenda. There's one agenda item, or are you thinking of more than that?
Budget discussion follow-up at this point.
Okay.
So it gives us a cumulative time to have all these discussions versus it's a lot. And we still have some questions that are outstanding.
Yeah.
Councilor Boss?
Is it required that all of our workshops start at 5:30, or is it possible to move them earlier?
Yeah, I don't know. That's not required. No. Have we had them earlier before?
The earliest I think we started is 5 o'clock. Of course, we're in the new norm right now.
Even 5 o'clock would be helpful.
Yeah. Counselors, anybody, let's try this. Anybody up to trying something at 4:30?
Yes.
Can I get Councilor Carrier, Milks, Leroy, Belinda, 4:30. Mr. Manager?
4:30 is fine. I don't think you find objection from staff.
Okay. Then why don't we shoot for 4:30 then? Great idea. Thanks, Councilor Boss.
Thank you.
It's still going to go till 9, hopefully, right? We'll still go till 9.
Okay. You'll still go tonight, Councilor Lasagna.
Just quickly, when are the Zoom invitations usually sent out? I might have missed one, but I got one today at 3 something.
They're sent out the morning of the meeting. So today they were sent at 11 a.m.
Okay, great. So we expect them around then, Kelsey?
Yes, and then I usually resend them later in the afternoon if I start getting a message or two from people that they don't see it in their email, just so that it pops up at the top.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. I'll be on the lookout in the mornings then.
Okay, so 4:30, April 23rd. And Mr. Manager, I know you said that you're going to have your revised budget presented on April 27th.
Correct.
Will the conversations we have on the 23rd help kind of give you a little bit more clarity and directional?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
very good.
And I can, at that point, I can share with you what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Get to zero.
Okay, I think that's a great conversation. And if you want, maybe you and myself and Phil can look at kind of the format in which we can run that a meeting efficiently. We can start by departments, and we can cover that between now and the 23rd.
If the council's fine with that, you're fine with that, that's good with us.
Council good? Okay, very good. We'll make sure we have a good meeting on the 23rd. I'm looking at the schedule now. Are there any final thoughts, Councilor Walker?
Yeah, I have one for the manager because I've forgotten whatever made it happen. A year ago or a year and a half ago, Jill hired a young lady to work in her office. And if I remember right, back when she was looking for another person, it was kind of based around the same thing as she told us the other night. She was thinking about retiring and finding someone that maybe she could bring in that's going to take her place, or maybe not. But am I wrong or incorrect, or was that? But I know she hired somebody and they've been with her at least a year. Is that position the position she was looking for or not looking for?
Jill can speak for herself and should, to answer your question, but no, you're not totally wrong. I mean, we were looking at trying to bring someone in that we could perhaps develop. I think that the position that we need, that we put in the budget, from my perspective and Phil's, and I think Jill's, there's a clear need for it. Jill, do you want to answer Council Walker's question?
Well, I was hoping that I would get a candidate that could possibly take over for me. But the position that was hired was actually Jill Cunningham. When she moved up to IT, she left a hole, and the person was hired to do accounts payable, accounts receivable, and I don't think that person is qualified to do my job.
So it was a replacement. It wasn't.
It was a replacement position. Yeah. My hope was that I would have someone that could possibly move up, but I'm not thinking that that's going to be the case.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Walker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. At this point, I'm going to take us out of workshop. I'm going to gavel us into a special session. We have one piece of business. It's new business. Order 4704162020. After that, we will then go into executive session. And post-executive session, we will be adjourning for the evening. Actually, we're going to adjourn from the special meeting, then go into executive session.
Right.
So with that said, I now declare the workshop over. Now I'd like to call to order the special city council meeting of April 16th, 2020. On the agenda tonight is one new business item. It's order 4704162020. I'll read this. Ensuring safe options for temporary housing to victims of domestic violence and allowing for the use of existing churches and municipal buildings to help provide temporary housing solutions for victims of domestic violence with a simple staff level reviewing for building safety. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion from Counselor Carrier. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Counselor Gary. Is there any discussion? Counselor Lasagna.
I was able to have some discussion today. I know Elise Johansson looked at this and had a good conversation with the assistant city manager about this. And I think it is important to move forward with this, but make sure that we include safe voices in this planning and execution.
I think we need to include every organization that has a vested interest, obviously, in domestic violence and domestic health. I wouldn't want to single out anyone.
No, I think that's true, but they're the lead organization in our community, so they could certainly bring in the others.
We are doing that.
Is there any other comment? None? Okay, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Is the clerk on the phone tonight? If not, I'll ask for a.
She is.
She is? Okay.
Sue?
Oh, I see her. Look, city clerk. Sue?
He tried speaking.
Counselor Walker? Counselor Walker?
No, I don't think I'm in favor.
Counselor Boss?
Yes.
Counselor Gary?
Yes.
Counselor Lasagna?
Yes.
Counselor McLeod?
Yes.
Counselor Phillips?
Yes.
Counselor Carrier?
Yes.
The order passes by a vote of 6-1. Very good. At this point in time, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I got a motion, Counselor Carrier. Do I have a second?
Second.
By voice vote, all those in favor of adjourning?
Yay.
Yay.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Opposed? None being, we stand adjourned. Yay. Where did that come from?